When a notorious crime boss discovers his 8-month pregnant ex-wife holding divorce papers in the lobby of a building, the underworld begins to shake. Selene Vale thinks she might disappear forever. Lucien Draven, the man she once loved and feared, will never know about the child. But when his icy gaze meets her bulging belly, everything changes in an instant. Follow this story to the end. Don't forget to like and comment where you're starting from. I want to know how far this story has come. The rain came down like bullets against the streets of Chicago, turning the asphalt into black mirrors that reflected neon signs and taillights bleeding into the dark. Selene Vale stood under the overhang of a shuttered newsstand 3 blocks from Blackthorn Tower, one hand pressed against her lower back and the other clutching the envelope that held her freedom. The divorce papers inside were unsigned. She'd carried them for 6 weeks, folded and refolded so many times the creases had started to tear. 8 months pregnant, and her feet were killing her. She told herself she wouldn't come here, not to this part of the city, not to his building, but the lawyer had insisted the papers needed Lucien's signature or she'd be tied to him legally for another year minimum, maybe longer if he contested. And Selene couldn't wait another year. Not with the baby coming, not with the way her savings were running dry and the motel clerk had started looking at her stomach with questions in his eyes. She pushed off from the wall and started walking, each step a negotiation between her swollen ankles and her pride. The tower rose ahead like a shard of black glass stabbing into the storm clouds, all sharp angles and tinted windows that gave nothing away. Lucien owned the top 15 floors. The rest he rented to corporations that didn't ask questions about the men in expensive suits who came and went at odd hours. Selene had lived in the penthouse once. She remembered the view. She remembered the bed. She remembered the night she'd packed a single bag and climbed down the emergency stairs 23 floors because the elevator required a keycard she no longer trusted herself to use. That was 14 months ago. The lobby doors were glass and steel, the kind that whispered money when they opened. Selene stepped inside and the noise of the rain cut off like someone had thrown a switch. Marble floors, recessed lighting, a security desk where 2 men in black suits looked up simultaneously, their hands drifting toward their belts in a choreographed movement that would have been funny if it wasn't so practiced. "I need to see Lucien Draven," Selene said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The taller guard stood. "Mr. Draven doesn't take walk-ins. He'll take this one. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to tell him Selene is here." Something shifted in the guard's expression. Recognition, maybe, or the memory of a memo he'd read months ago about a woman who used to live upstairs. He picked up a phone, spoke quietly into it, then set it down with the careful movements of someone who'd just been given orders he didn't like. 32nd floor, he said. Elevator on the right. Selene's heart kicked against her ribs. She'd expected resistance. She'd expected to be turned away, to leave the papers with a receptionist and disappear into the rain before Lucien even knew she'd been here. This was worse. This was an invitation. The elevator was empty and moved too fast. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished walls, dark hair pulled into a ponytail, maternity jeans she'd bought at a thrift store, a coat that didn't quite close over her stomach anymore. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd been running and had finally run out of road. The 30th floor was executive offices, leather furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than a car. A receptionist who looked like she'd been hired from a modeling agency glanced up, then immediately stood. "Ms. Vale, Mr. Draven is expecting you. Conference room 3. Selene followed the woman's gesture down a hallway that smelled like expensive cologne and furniture polish. The door to conference room 3 was open. Inside, floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city sprawling out in every direction, rain streaking down the glass in diagonal lines that caught the light. Lucien Draven stood with his back to the door, hands in his pockets, staring out at his kingdom. He was taller than Selene remembered, broader in the shoulders. He wore a charcoal suit tailored so precisely it might as well have been painted on. And his dark hair was cut short in a way that made the sharp angles of his face even sharper. When he turned around, his eyes were the same ice blue she'd fallen in love with 3 years ago in a hotel bar where she'd been singing jazz, and he'd been sitting alone at a corner table, watching her like she was the only person in the room. Those eyes dropped to her stomach and stopped. The silence stretched out like a wire pulled too tight. "Selene." His voice was exactly the same, low and controlled and carrying the kind of authority that made people obey without thinking about it. Lucien. He crossed the room in 4 steps and stopped just close enough that she could smell his aftershave, some woody, expensive thing she'd never been able to identify. His gaze hadn't left her stomach. You're pregnant. Observant as always. How far along? 8 months. She watched his jaw tighten, watched him do the math in his head, watched the exact moment he arrived at the answer. It's mine. It wasn't a question, but Selene nodded anyway. The baby chose that moment to kick, a rolling movement that pressed against the fabric of her shirt. Lucien's eyes tracked the motion like a predator watching prey. Why didn't you tell me? His voice had gone quiet. That was worse than if he'd yelled. Because I left for a reason. What reason? Selene pulled the envelope from her pocket and held it out. Sign these and you'll never have to see me again. Lucien looked at the envelope like it was a snake. He didn't take it. Instead, he moved past her and closed the conference room door with a soft click that sounded too much like a cell locking. Sit down. I'm fine standing. Selene, sit down. She sat. Not because he'd told her to, but because her back was screaming and her feet felt like they were stuffed with broken glass. Lucien pulled out the chair across from her and sat too, his movements precise and controlled. He was always controlled. That was the problem. Talk to me, he said. There's nothing to talk about. Sign the papers. I disappear. You go back to whatever you were doing before I walked in here. You're carrying my child and you think I'm just going to let you disappear? You don't get a vote. The hell I don't. Selene's hands were shaking, so she folded them on top of the table. You know what you are, Lucien. You know what you do. I couldn't stay in that world. I won't raise a child in it. So you were just going to run? Raise my son or daughter alone? She's a girl. Selene hadn't meant to say it, but the words came out anyway. The baby. She's a girl. Something cracked in Lucien's expression. For just a second, he looked like a different person entirely, someone younger and more vulnerable. And then the mask came back down, and he was the Lucien Draven who ran the largest criminal network in the Midwest again. A daughter, he said quietly. Sign the papers, Lucien. He reached across the table and pulled the envelope from her hand before she could react. Then he tore it in half. Then in half again. He let the pieces fall onto the polished wood like snow. No. You can't just... I'm not signing anything. He stood up, walked back to the window, stared out at the rain. You disappeared for over a year. You let me think you were dead or worse, and now you show up 8 months pregnant with my daughter and expect me to just let you walk away again? That's not happening, Selene. You don't own me. I never said I did. He turned around and the look on his face made her breath catch. But that's my daughter you're carrying, and I'll be damned if she grows up thinking her father didn't want her. This isn't about what you want. Then what is it about? You being scared? You running from something that doesn't have to be the way it was? Selene pushed herself to her feet. The room tilted slightly and she grabbed the back of the chair to steady herself. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. I can't. Why not? Because you'll try to fix it. The words came out louder than she'd intended, echoing off the glass and leather. You'll throw money at it, or send men with guns, or make someone disappear, and that's exactly why I left. I don't want that life for her. I don't want her growing up in a world where problems get solved with violence and fear. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Where are you living? That's none of your business. Selene, where are you living? She didn't answer. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking too quietly for her to hear the words. When he hung up, he looked at her and said, Rosewood Motel, room 14. You've been there for 5 weeks. The manager says your rent's 2 days late. The anger came up so fast it made her dizzy. You had someone following me? I've had people looking for you since the day you left. That's insane. That's love. The word hung in the air between them like something physical. Selene's throat felt too tight. She remembered the last time he'd said it, tangled in sheets with dawn light coming through the windows, and his hand on her hip like she was something precious. I need to go, she managed. No. You can't keep me here. Watch me. He moved to block the door and Selene felt the panic rising, the same panic that had driven her down 23 flights of stairs in the middle of the night. She backed up until her shoulders hit the window, the glass cold through her shirt. Lucien, please. He stopped, looked at her, really looked at her, and whatever he saw made his expression soften into something that hurt worse than anger. I'm not going to hurt you, he said quietly. I never hurt you. You hurt people. That's what you do. Not you. Never you. He took a step back, giving her space. Just stay. Tonight. Let me make sure you're okay. Let me get a doctor to check on the baby. Then if you still want to leave in the morning, I won't stop you. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Selene was so tired, tired of running, tired of being scared, tired of sleeping in motel rooms that smelled like mildew and cigarettes. And the baby was moving again, restless little kicks that said she was running out of room in there. One night, Selene said, Lucien's shoulders relaxed a fraction. He pulled out his phone again, made another call. This one was longer, a series of quiet commands that ended with him saying, have Dr. Morrison meet us at the penthouse in 20 minutes, and get some food sent up, real food, not that catered garbage. He hung up and looked at Selene. Can you walk or should I carry you? I can walk. You look like you're about to fall over. I've been about to fall over for 3 months. I'm used to it. The corner of his mouth twitched like he might smile, but didn't. Come on. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent. Selene kept her eyes on the numbers climbing, watching floor after floor disappear below them. When the doors opened onto the private foyer of the penthouse, she felt the memories hit her like a physical force. She decorated this space, picked out the console table, the abstract painting on the wall, the vase that sat empty because Lucien never remembered to buy flowers. The penthouse itself was exactly the same. Open floor plan, minimalist furniture, windows that showed the whole city spread out like a circuit board. The kitchen where she'd learned to make coffee the way he liked it. The hallway that led to the bedroom where she'd woken up next to him for 18 months straight, before the night she couldn't do it anymore. Lucien guided her to the couch with a hand on her elbow, gentle in a way that made her want to cry or scream or both. She sat, and he disappeared into the kitchen, coming back with a glass of water he pressed into her hand. Drink. She drank. The water was cold and tasted like it came from some expensive filter system. Everything in Lucien's world was expensive. The doctor arrived exactly 20 minutes later, a woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her dark hair and the kind of calm competence that came from 30 years of delivering babies in situations that ranged from normal to catastrophic. She examined Selene on the couch while Lucien paced by the windows like a caged animal, his hands shoved in his pockets and his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. Everything looks good, Dr. Morrison said finally, packing her equipment back into a leather bag. Baby's heartbeat is strong, position is good, you're measuring right on track for 32 weeks. When's your due date? March 15th. 6 weeks out. You should be seeing an OB regularly at this point. Do you have one? Selene's silence was answer enough. Dr. Morrison looked at Lucien, then back at Selene. I'm going to give you my card. Call me anytime, day or night. And I mean that literally. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. and you just want someone to tell you the Braxton Hicks are normal. Call me. Thank you, Selene said quietly. After the doctor left, Lucien ordered food from some restaurant that didn't deliver to normal people, but apparently made exceptions for crime lords who owned half the city. It arrived in covered dishes that a man in a white jacket set out on the dining table before disappearing back into the elevator without a word. Selene ate because she was starving and because the alternative was talking. Grilled chicken and roasted vegetables and some kind of rice pilaf that probably had a French name she didn't know. Lucien sat across from her and moved food around his plate without eating much of anything. You need to eat, Selene said. I'm fine. You look like hell. I haven't slept properly in 14 months, and the admission hung between them. Selene set down her fork and said, That's not my fault. I didn't say it was. He met her eyes across the table. I thought you were dead, Selene. For the first 2 months, I was convinced someone had taken you, killed you, dumped your body somewhere I'd never find it. Do you have any idea what that did to me? You could have let me go. No, I really couldn't. After dinner, Lucien showed her to the guest room, which was down the hall from the master bedroom, and still nicer than anywhere Selene had lived in the past year. King-size bed, attached bathroom, a closet full of clothes that looked suspiciously like they'd fit a pregnant woman. When did you have time to buy these, Jig? She asked, running her hand over a soft cotton dress. I didn't. I had someone else do it while we were eating. Of course he did. Lucien didn't do anything himself if he could delegate it to someone who'd do it faster and better. Thank you, Selene said, because the clothes were nice and she was tired of fighting. There's towels in the bathroom. Toothbrush is still in the package. If you need anything else, just ask. He turned to leave and Selene heard herself say, Lucien. He stopped in the doorway, waiting. Why are you doing this? He looked back at her over his shoulder and the expression on his face was so raw it hurt to see. Because you're carrying my daughter and because I love you. In that order or the reverse, I haven't figured out which yet. Then he was gone and Selene was alone in a room that felt too big and too quiet. She showered, put on one of the soft dresses, and climbed into bed. The mattress was perfect. The pillows were perfect. Everything was perfect except for the fact that she was back in the building she'd sworn she'd never return to, carrying the child of a man who'd just torn up her divorce papers like they were junk mail. She was asleep in minutes. The nightmare came around 3 a.m, the same one she'd been having for months now, men with guns breaking down the door of wherever she was living, dragging her into a van, the sound of the baby crying even though she hadn't been born yet. Selene woke up gasping, her heart slamming against her ribs, her hands on her stomach where the baby was kicking in response to her panic. The bedroom door opened and Lucien appeared, wearing sweatpants and nothing else, his hair standing up like he'd been dragging his hands through it. You screamed, he said. Bad dream. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his skin. Want to talk about it? Not really. Okay. They sat in silence for a minute. The baby kicked again and Selene winced, shifting to try to find a comfortable position that didn't exist. Here. Lucien reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement like she was a spooked horse. May I? Selene didn't answer, but she didn't pull away either. He pressed his palm against her stomach, right where the baby's foot was pushing, and his whole face transformed into something Selene had never seen before. Wonder, maybe? Or fear? Probably both. The baby kicked directly into his hand and Lucien made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something else entirely. She's strong, he said. She gets it from you. She gets it from both of us. His hand was still on her stomach, warm and steady. Selene knew she should tell him to move it, should pull away, should remember all the reasons she'd left in the first place. But it had been so long since anyone had touched her with gentleness instead of suspicion or pity, and she was so tired of being strong, all by herself. Stay, she heard herself say. Lucien looked up at her. What? Just stay. Until I fall asleep, please. He should have said no. Should have left her alone in the guest room like a gentleman. Instead, he stretched out on top of the covers beside her, careful not to crowd her, and put his hand back on her stomach where the baby was still moving restlessly. I'm here, he said quietly. I've got you. Selene closed her eyes and felt herself starting to drift. The last thing she remembered was the steady rhythm of Lucien's breathing and the weight of his hand anchoring her to something that felt dangerously close to safety. She woke up alone. Gray morning light filtered through the windows, and the space beside her was empty, the covers still perfectly smooth like no one had been there at all. For a second, Selene thought she'd dreamed the whole thing. Then she heard voices in the living room. She got up slowly, her back protesting, and walked down the hallway in bare feet. Lucien stood by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the clipped tones he used for business. He was dressed now, black suit and white shirt, looking every inch the kingpin who ran an empire built on things people didn't talk about in polite company. He saw her and ended the call immediately. You're awake. What time is it? Just past 8. How'd you sleep? Better than I have in months. Something shifted in his expression. Satisfaction, maybe. He gestured toward the kitchen. There's breakfast. And coffee. Decaf. Selene found pastries and fruit and a carafe of coffee that smelled like heaven. She poured herself a cup and sat at the counter, aware of Lucien watching her from across the room. I need to leave today, she said between sips. Why? Because I have a life. A job. What job? I work at a diner, night shifts mostly. Lucien's expression went very still. You're 8 months pregnant and working night shifts at a diner? I need the money. You don't need money. You need to let me take care of you. I don't want your money, Lucien. Then what do you want? The question was so big, Selene didn't know where to start answering it. She wanted safety. She wanted her daughter to grow up normal. She wanted to not wake up every morning wondering if today would be the day Lucien's world caught up with them and dragged them both down. Before she could figure out how to say any of that, Lucien's phone rang again. He glanced at the screen, and his whole body went tense. I need to take this. He walked into his office and closed the door. Selene could hear his voice rising, sharp and angry, though she couldn't make out the words. When he came back out 5 minutes later, his jaw was set and his eyes had gone cold. Get dressed, he said. We need to leave. What? Why? Because someone just leaked to the Volkov family that I have a pregnant girlfriend living in my building, and Dmitry Volkov has been looking for leverage against me for the past 6 months. Selene's blood went cold. She knew that name. Everyone in Lucien's world knew that name. The Volkovs ran the Russian operations in the city, and they'd been pushing into Lucien's territory for years, always testing the boundaries, always looking for weakness. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she said, setting down her coffee cup before her shaking hands could drop it. I know. Lucien was already moving, pulling out his phone and barking orders into it. Marcus, I need a car downstairs in 5 minutes. Full security detail. And get Bishop on the line. Tell him we need to move the meeting to a secure location. Lucien, not now, Selene. Just get dressed and pack whatever you need. We're leaving. Where are we going? He looked at her, and his expression was harder than she'd ever seen it. Somewhere safe. Somewhere Dmitry Volkov and every other vulture in this city can't touch you or our daughter. I thought you said one night, you promised if I wanted to leave this morning, you wouldn't stop me. That was before someone put a target on your back. Selene felt the panic rising again, the same trapped feeling that had driven her away in the first place. This is why I left. This is exactly why I left. I know. Lucien crossed the room and put his hands on her shoulders, gentle despite the urgency in his voice. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry you got pulled back into this. But right now the only thing that matters is keeping you safe. So please, get dressed. Let me protect you and our daughter. And when this is over, we can fight about everything else. Selene looked into his ice blue eyes and saw fear there. Real fear. Lucien Draven, who'd built an empire on being untouchable, was terrified. And if he was scared, then she should be absolutely petrified. Okay, she whispered. She went back to the guest room and changed into jeans and a sweater, her hands fumbling with the buttons. Behind her, she heard Lucien making more calls, his voice rising and falling in a pattern she recognized from the months she'd lived here. Crisis management, damage control. The sound of a man trying to control chaos through sheer force of will. When she came back out, Lucien had changed too, trading the suit jacket for something that looked the same, but probably had body armor built into it. He had a gun tucked into a holster at his hip that he didn't bother trying to hide. Ready? He asked. Before Selene could answer, something crashed through the window. The explosion was deafening. Glass shattered inward in a spray of glittering fragments, and Selene felt Lucien's body slam into hers, driving her down behind the kitchen counter as the world turned into noise and smoke and breaking things. Her ears rang. Something warm ran down her face. The baby was kicking frantically, and Selene curled around her stomach, trying to protect her daughter from whatever was happening. Above her, she heard gunfire. Controlled bursts that could only be Lucien's men returning fire at someone who'd just thrown what was probably a grenade through a 30th floor window. Which meant someone had access to the building. Which meant they'd gotten past security. Which meant this was so much worse than a leaked piece of information. Lucien hauled her to her feet and dragged her toward the private elevator, keeping his body between her and the broken window. His face was cut, blood running from a gash above his eyebrow, but his hands were steady on her arms. Move, he said. Not loud, not panicked, just absolutely certain. The elevator doors opened and they stumbled inside. Lucien slammed his hand against the button for the parking garage and the car started dropping. Fast. Too fast. Selene's stomach lurched and she grabbed onto Lucien's arm to keep from falling. Are you hurt? He demanded, running his hands over her like he could find injuries by touch. I don't know. I don't think so. The baby? She's moving. She's okay. The elevator hit the parking garage and the doors opened onto chaos. Men in tactical gear were moving between cars, securing the perimeter. A black SUV idled near the elevator with its doors already open. Lucien pushed Selene toward it, and she fell into the back seat, her hand shaking so badly she couldn't fasten her seatbelt. Lucien did it for her, then climbed in beside her and slammed the door. Drive. The SUV peeled out of the garage with enough force to throw Selene against the door. She grabbed the handle and held on while the driver took corners at speeds that should have been illegal and probably were. Behind them, she could hear sirens, police maybe, or fire trucks, or more of whoever had just tried to kill them. Where are we going? She managed. Lucien was on his phone again, speaking in rapid-fire sentences that didn't sound like English. When he hung up, he looked at Selene, and the expression on his face made her forget how to breathe. Somewhere they'll never find you, he said, even if I have to burn this whole city down to make sure of it. The safe house was 40 minutes outside the city, buried in the kind of industrial wasteland where people didn't ask questions because they already knew the answers wouldn't be good. Abandoned factories stretched out in every direction like corpses of a better economy, their windows shattered and their walls covered in graffiti that had faded to ghosts of color. The SUV pulled into a loading dock behind a building that looked condemned but probably wasn't, and Lucien had Selene out of the car before the engine even stopped. Inside, he said, his hand on her lower back, pushing her toward a steel door that opened before they reached it. The interior was nothing like the penthouse. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, furniture that looked like it had been salvaged from a dozen different places, and none of them nice. But there were guards everywhere, men with rifles and tactical vests who nodded at Lucien as he passed like this was just another Tuesday. Selene's legs gave out halfway across the main room, and she grabbed onto a metal support beam to keep from falling. Lucien caught her other arm and guided her to a couch that had seen better decades. She sat and put her head between her knees, trying to breathe through the nausea rolling through her stomach in waves. "Get Dr. Morrison here," Lucien said to someone Selene couldn't see. "Now." "I'm fine," Selene managed, though her voice came out thin and shaky. "You're not fine. You were almost blown up an hour ago." "The baby's still moving. That's what matters." Lucien knelt in front of her, his hands on her knees, his face so close she could see the blood still drying on his temple. "Look at me." She did. His eyes were wild, pupils blown wide with adrenaline that hadn't worn off yet. "I need you to tell me the truth," he said. "Are you hurt? Did anything hit you? Any pain that wasn't there before?" Selene took inventory. Her hands were scraped from where she'd hit the floor. Her shoulder ached where Lucien had slammed into her. But the baby was doing somersaults like she was training for the Olympics, which meant she was okay. Everything else was secondary. "I'm not hurt," she said. Lucien closed his eyes and let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in his chest since the window exploded. When he opened them again, some of the wildness had faded, but the fear was still there, bright and terrible. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "No." "Yes." He stood up and paced away from her, dragging both hands through his hair. "Should have anticipated this. Should have known Dmitri would make a move the second he heard about you. I got careless. I let my guard down and you almost died because of it." "Lucien, don't." He turned back to her and the look on his face was so raw it hurt. "Don't tell me it's not my fault. Don't tell me it's okay. Nothing about this is okay." Selene opened her mouth to argue, but the door banged open and Dr. Morrison came through it carrying her medical bag and looking significantly less calm than she had the night before. She took one look at Selene and started pulling equipment out of the bag without saying a word. The exam took 20 minutes. Blood pressure. Heartbeat. Measuring the baby's position through Selene's stomach with hands that were gentle but efficient. When she was done, Dr. Morrison sat back and said, "You're both fine. Miraculously. But you need rest. Real rest. Not whatever you've been doing." "I'll make sure she rests," Lucien said from across the room. Dr. Morrison looked at him like she wanted to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. She packed up her equipment and left with a final instruction to call her if anything changed, no matter how small. After she was gone, the silence in the safe house felt heavy enough to crush bone. Selene sat on the couch and watched Lucien pace like a caged animal, his movements sharp and agitated. Finally, she said, "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" He stopped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, why did Dmitri Volkov try to kill us? What did you do to him?" "I didn't do anything to him. He's been pushing into my territory for months. This was just the excuse he needed to escalate." "So I'm an excuse?" "You're not an excuse. You're..." He cut himself off, shook his head. Your leverage. The second Dmitri found out I had someone I cared about, someone pregnant with my child, you became the biggest weakness I've ever had. The words landed like a slap. Selene stood up slowly, her hands pressed against her lower back. So this is about you, about your empire, about your war with the Volkovs. No, this is about keeping you alive. By dragging me deeper into the exact world I was trying to escape? You think I wanted this? Lucien's voice rose, sharp and angry. You think I wanted you anywhere near this mess? I spent 14 months trying to find you so I could make sure you were safe, and the second I do, you're already in the crosshairs because someone in my organization has a leak and I can't trust anyone except the 5 men standing guard outside. Then let me go. Sign the divorce papers and let me disappear again. They already know about you, Selene. Letting you go now doesn't change that. It just means you'd be out there alone when they come for you. The truth of it settled over her like ice water. She'd thought running would keep her safe, thought distance would protect her daughter from the violence that followed Lucien like a shadow. But the moment she'd walked into Blackthorn Tower, she'd painted a target on both their backs that no amount of running would erase. I can't do this, she whispered. Lucien crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed her shoulders, not hard but firm enough that she had to look at him. Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know. You left me, left everything, and survived on your own for over a year while pregnant. You can survive this too. I'm tired of surviving. I want to live. Then let me help you. Your help is what got me into this mess. His hands dropped from her shoulders like she'd burned him. He stepped back, and the expression on his face was so closed off, she might as well have been looking at a stranger. You're right, he said quietly. This is my fault. All of it. And if I could go back and change it, I would. But I can't. So right now, the only thing I can do is make sure you and our daughter don't pay for my mistakes with your lives. He walked away before Selene could respond, disappearing through a door that led deeper into the building. She heard his voice rise, giving orders to someone about perimeter security and rotating guards and sweeping the building for tracking devices. The sound of a man trying to control the uncontrollable through sheer force of will. Selene sat back down on the couch and put her hands on her stomach, feeling the baby shift and settle. I'm sorry, she whispered to her daughter. I'm so sorry I brought you into this. The baby kicked once, hard enough to make Selene wince, like she was saying it wasn't her mother's fault, or maybe like she was saying she was a fighter too. Night fell, and the safe house got colder. Someone brought Selene a blanket and a plate of food that she picked at without tasting. Lucien was on the phone in another room, his voice a constant low rumble punctuated by silences that probably meant bad news. The guards changed shifts with military precision, new faces replacing old ones in a rotation that suggested this was going to be a long-term situation. Around midnight, Lucien finally emerged from whatever war room he'd been holed up in. He looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that came from running on adrenaline for too many hours straight. He sat down on the opposite end of the couch from Selene, careful to leave space between them. I talked to my people, he said. The attack was coordinated. 3 separate teams hit the building simultaneously. 2 were decoys to draw off security. The 3rd had inside information about which floor you were on, which window to target, and exactly when we'd be in the living room. Selene's blood went cold. Someone told them. Yes. Who? I don't know yet, but I will. His voice had gone flat and deadly. And when I find out who sold you out, they're going to wish Dmitri had gotten to them first. This is insane. This whole thing is insane. Welcome to my world. I didn't want to be in your world. That's the entire point. Lucien turned to look at her, and the anger in his eyes had cooled into something harder and more dangerous. You stopped being able to choose the moment you got pregnant with my child. I'm sorry if that's not what you want to hear, but it's the truth. You're part of this now, whether you like it or not. I hate you, Selene said, and meant it. I know. They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the broken windows on the upper floors. One of the guards coughed. A radio crackled with static and voices speaking in code Selene didn't understand. Finally, Lucien said, There's a bedroom in the back. It's not much, but it's better than the couch. You should sleep. I'm not tired. You're exhausted. I can see it from here. Fine, I'm exhausted. But I'm not sleeping while you're out here planning whatever violent revenge you're planning. This isn't about revenge. This is about sending a message. What message? That anyone who comes after you or our daughter answers to me, and I don't take prisoners. The casual brutality of it made Selene's stomach turn. This was the Lucien she'd run from, the one who solved problems with fear and violence, the one who could say he didn't take prisoners like he was discussing the weather. I need air, she said, standing up too fast. The room tilted and she grabbed the back of the couch to steady herself. Lucien was on his feet immediately, reaching for her. You're not going outside. I need air, Lucien. I can't breathe in here. Then I'll open a window. I want to go outside. No. You can't keep me locked in here like a prisoner. Watch me. Selene shoved past him, or tried to. He caught her arm and spun her around, and suddenly they were standing too close, breathing hard, staring at each other with all the anger and fear and unfinished business from the past 14 months crackling in the air between them. Let go of me, Selene said quietly. Not until you promise you're not going to do something stupid. Like what? Run? Where exactly would I run to, Lucien? You've made it very clear I'm trapped here. You're not trapped. You're protected. Those feel like the same thing right now. His grip on her arm loosened but didn't let go. I know you're scared. I know you hate this. But I need you to trust me. I don't trust you. I don't trust anyone. Then trust that I love our daughter enough to keep her safe no matter what it costs me. Selene pulled free and stepped back, putting distance between them. I'm going to the bedroom. Don't follow me. She walked away before he could respond, down a narrow hallway that smelled like mildew and concrete. The bedroom was exactly as advertised, not much. A mattress on a metal frame, a single lamp, a window that had been covered with plywood from the inside. She lay down fully clothed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the safe house settling around her. She must have slept because she woke up to voices arguing, not loud but intense, the kind of argument that happened in harsh whispers because yelling would give away too much. Selene sat up slowly and pressed her ear against the door. Can't stay here indefinitely. A man's voice she didn't recognize. We stay as long as it takes. That was Lucien. The men are getting restless. This wasn't supposed to be a long-term operation. I don't care what it was supposed to be. I care about keeping her safe. At what cost? You're bleeding resources on this, Lucien. Then, every day we're here is a day the Volkovs are consolidating your territory. By the time this is over, you might not have an empire left to go back to. Then I don't have an empire. Silence. Then the other man said, You don't mean that. Don't I? More silence. Selene held her breath, straining to hear. What about the deal with the Koreans? The man said finally. That meeting was supposed to happen 2 days ago. They're not going to wait forever. Reschedule it. For when? I don't know. When it's safe. Lucien, I said reschedule it, Marcus, or walk away. I'm not leaving her. Footsteps. A door slamming. Then nothing. Selene opened the bedroom door and found Lucien standing alone in the main room, staring at a map spread out on a table. It was covered in pins and markers and notes written in handwriting too small to read from this distance. How much did you hear? He asked, without looking up. Enough. Then you know I'm making a mess of this. She walked closer, studying the map. It showed the city divided into territories marked in different colors. Red for Lucien's holdings, blue for the Volkovs, green and yellow for groups she didn't recognize, and scattered throughout were black X marks that made her stomach clench. What are those? She asked, pointing to the X marks. Places Dmitri has hit in the last 72 hours. Warehouses, distribution centers, one of my clubs on the north side. He's taking your territory. Yes, because you're here with me instead of fighting back. Lucien finally looked up and the exhaustion on his face was worse than it had been hours ago. Yes. Then go back and deal with it. No. Lucien. No, Selene. I'm not leaving you here alone. I'm not going back to the city while there's a target on your back. I don't care if Dmitri takes every building I own. I don't care if the whole empire burns down. None of it matters if you and our daughter are dead. But it does matter. This is your life. Everything you built. I built it on blood and fear and choices I can't take back. Maybe it's time it all came down." Selene stared at him. This was a different version of Lucien Draven than the one she'd known. That Lucien had been all sharp edges and calculated moves, every decision made to strengthen his position and eliminate threats. This Lucien looked like a man who'd already lost and was just trying to minimize the damage. "What happened to you?" she asked quietly. "You left. That's what happened." He turned back to the map. "For 14 months, I told myself I could find you and bring you back and everything would go back to normal. But there is no normal anymore. There's just this. You, pregnant with my daughter, hiding in a condemned building while my empire collapses around me. And the worst part is I don't even care. You should care. Why? So I can go back to being the man you ran away from?" The question hung in the air between them. Selene didn't have an answer because he was right. She'd left because he was too deep in his world, too willing to use violence and fear to solve problems. If he went back now and fought Dmitri the way he normally would, he'd just become that man again. But if he didn't, they'd both end up dead anyway. "I don't know what you want me to say," she admitted. "I don't want you to say anything. I just want you to be safe." Before Selene could respond, one of the guards came through the front door moving fast. "We've got movement on the perimeter, 2 vehicles approaching from the east access road." Lucien's whole demeanor changed instantly. The exhausted man disappeared and the crime lord came back, all cold precision and deadly focus. "How many?" "Can't tell yet. At least 6, maybe more." "Get everyone inside, lock it down, and get her to the basement. Now." The guard grabbed Selene's arm and started pulling her toward a door she hadn't noticed before. She dug in her heels. "Wait, what's happening?" "They found us," Lucien said. He was already pulling his gun, checking the magazine with practiced efficiency. "Which means either someone followed us or the leak is worse than I thought." "Lucien, go with Marcus. There's a tunnel in the basement that leads to a secondary location 3 blocks south. If things go bad up here, you run. Do you understand me? You run and you don't look back. I'm not leaving you." "You are if I tell you to." He crossed the room and kissed her forehead, hard and fast. "Keep our daughter safe. That's all that matters." Then Marcus was dragging her toward the basement stairs, and she was stumbling down them in the dark, her hand on her stomach and her heart trying to punch through her ribs. Behind her, she heard Lucien shouting orders and the sound of men taking positions. The basement was exactly as terrible as she'd imagined: concrete walls, standing water, the smell of rot and rust. Marcus pushed her toward the far wall where a section of concrete had been removed to reveal a tunnel barely wide enough to crawl through. "In," he said. "What about Lucien?" "He can take care of himself. You can't, so get in the tunnel and start moving." Selene looked at the tunnel, then back at the stairs. She could hear gunfire now, sharp cracks that echoed through the building. Someone was screaming. Glass shattered. "Please," Marcus said, and there was real fear in his voice. "If something happens to you, Lucien will kill every single one of us, and then he'll kill himself, so please, get in the tunnel." Selene got in the tunnel. It was worse than she'd imagined. Narrow and dark and wet, with things dripping from the ceiling that she didn't want to think about. She crawled on her hands and knees, trying to protect her stomach, feeling her way forward in the pitch black. Behind her, she could still hear gunfire, fainter now, but constant. The sound of a battle being fought without her. The tunnel seemed to go on forever. Her hands were scraped raw. Her knees ached. The baby was rolling and kicking in distress, picking up on Selene's panic. Finally, she saw light ahead, a gray square that meant exit. She crawled faster, ignoring the pain, and emerged into another basement in another abandoned building that looked exactly like the first one. A different guard was waiting for her, younger than Marcus, with a scar across his jaw and eyes that wouldn't meet hers. "Come on," he said. "We need to keep moving." "Where's Lucien?" "Still at the safe house. We're going to a vehicle 2 blocks from here." He helped her to her feet and led her up a different set of stairs, through a building that smelled like decay and animal waste. Outside it was still dark, the sky that particular shade of black that meant early morning but not yet dawn. The guard kept looking over his shoulder like he expected someone to jump out of the shadows. They made it 1 block before Selene realized something was wrong. The guard was walking too fast, practically dragging her, and he kept checking his phone with one hand while the other stayed on his gun. And when they turned a corner, There was a black sedan waiting with its engine running and its doors open. "Get in," the guard said. Selene stopped walking. "Who's in the car?" "Friends of Mr. Draven. They're going to take you somewhere safer." Lucien didn't say anything about other people. "Plans changed. Get in the car, Ms. Vale." Everything in Selene's body was screaming that this was wrong. The guard's voice was too tight, his eyes were still avoiding hers, and Lucien would never hand her off to people she'd never met without explaining it first. "No," she said. The guard's hand tightened on her arm. "It wasn't a request." "Let go of me." "I can't do that." Selene tried to pull free, but his grip was iron. She opened her mouth to scream, and he clamped his other hand over it, dragging her toward the sedan. She bit down hard and tasted blood. He swore and backhanded her across the face hard enough to make her vision white out. When she could see again, she was being shoved into the back seat of the sedan, the guard climbing in beside her and slamming the door. The driver pulled away from the curb before Selene could even sit up straight. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere your boyfriend can't find you," a voice said from the front passenger seat. The man who turned around to look at her was in his 50s, well-dressed, with the kind of face that would have been handsome if it wasn't so cold. He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Hello, Selene. My name is Dmitry Volkov, and you and I are going to have a very productive conversation about Lucien Draven's willingness to trade his empire for your life." Selene's blood turned to ice. She looked at the guard beside her, the one who'd led her right into a trap, and saw him staring straight ahead with his jaw clenched. "How much did they pay you?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. Dmitry laughed. "Enough. And before you think about doing something foolish, let me make one thing very clear. The only reason you're still alive is because you're carrying Lucien's child. The moment that stops being useful leverage, your usefulness ends. Do we understand each other?" Selene pressed her hands against her stomach, feeling the baby kick frantically beneath her palms. She understood perfectly. She was alone, pregnant, and in the hands of Lucien's worst enemy, and nobody was coming to save her. The sedan drove deeper into the industrial district, past buildings that looked like tombs and streets that hadn't seen streetlights in years. Selene kept her hands on her stomach and tried to think through the panic fogging her brain. Lucien would realize she was gone. He'd come looking for her. He'd tear the city apart brick by brick until he found her, unless he was already dead. The thought made her stomach heave. She swallowed hard against the nausea and forced herself to focus on the present. She was alive. The baby was alive. As long as both those things stayed true, there was still a chance. "Where are we going?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Patience," Dmitry said without turning around. "We'll be there soon enough." The sedan pulled into a warehouse that looked like it had been manufacturing something industrial before whatever company owned it went bankrupt. The guard pulled Selene out of the car and walked her inside, his hand on her elbow like she might run if he let go, which she absolutely would if she thought she had a chance of getting more than 10 feet. The interior of the warehouse had been converted into something that looked almost civilized. Lights strung from the rafters. Furniture that didn't match but was at least clean. A table set up in the center of the space with chairs around it like this was a business meeting instead of a kidnapping. Dmitry gestured to one of the chairs. "Sit, please." Selene sat because her legs were shaking and because standing felt like admitting weakness she couldn't afford. The baby was still kicking, restless movements that said she was picking up on her mother's fear. "I'm going to be very straightforward with you," Dmitry said, taking the chair across from her. "Lucien Draven has been a problem for my organization for quite some time. He holds territory that should rightfully belong to me. He refuses to negotiate in good faith, and he has a reputation that makes it difficult to conduct business in this city without his approval." "So kill him," Selene said. "Why am I here?" "Because killing Lucien creates a power vacuum that would take years to fill. But breaking him, destroying everything he's built and leaving him alive to watch it burn, that sends a much stronger message. And you think I'm how you break him. I know you are." Dmitry leaned back in his chair, studying her like she was a chess piece he was trying to figure out how to use. "He loves you, that much is obvious, and he loves the child you're carrying, which means he'll do anything to get you back. He won't negotiate with you." "Oh, I think he will, because the alternative is watching you die.
and I don't think Lucien Draven is ready to lose another person he loves. The way Dmitri said it made Celine's blood run cold. Another? You didn't know? Dmitri smiled. Lucien had a younger sister, 14 years old when she was killed in a drive-by shooting meant for him. That was what turned him from a promising young criminal into the monster he is today. He couldn't save her, but he can save you. All he has to do is give me what I want. Selene felt sick. Lucien had never mentioned a sister, never talked about his family at all except to say they were all dead, and he'd been on his own since he was 17. Now she understood why. What do you want? She asked. Everything. His territory, his connections, his distribution networks, his contacts with the Koreans, the Mexicans, everyone who's ever done business with him. I want him to hand over his entire empire and walk away with nothing. He'll never do that. Then you and your daughter will pay the price. And Lucien will spend the rest of his life knowing he chose pride over family. Dmitri stood up and buttoned his jacket like they'd just finished a pleasant lunch. I'm going to make him an offer. You should hope he's smart enough to take it. He walked away, leaving Selene alone at the table with the traitorous guard standing nearby. She looked at him and said, You know he's going to kill you for this. The guard's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Lucien doesn't forgive betrayal. Ever. Whatever Dmitri paid you, it wasn't enough. Shut up. How long have you worked for him? Years? And you sold him out for what? Money? A better position in the Volkov organization? You think Dmitri's going to trust you after this? You're a dead man walking. I said shut up. Selene leaned back in her chair as much as her stomach would allow. I hope it was worth it. The guard turned away, his shoulders tight with anger or guilt or both. Selene watched him and tried to figure out if there was any possible way to use his obvious discomfort to her advantage. But she was 8 months pregnant and exhausted, and he had a gun. The math didn't work in her favor. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt broken in the warehouse, marked only by the baby's movements and the occasional sound of footsteps outside. Selene dozed in the chair and woke up disoriented, her neck cramping and her back screaming. The guard brought her water and a sandwich she didn't eat. Finally, Dmitri came back. He had his phone in his hand and a satisfied expression on his face that made Selene's stomach drop. I've spoken with Lucien, he said. He's very eager to discuss terms. What did you tell him? The truth. That I have you. That you're unharmed. And that he has 24 hours to deliver what I've asked for, or I start sending him pieces of you until he complies. Selene's hands went to her stomach automatically, protective. You wouldn't. Are you willing to bet your life on that? Your daughter's life? She wasn't, and Dmitri knew it. He wants proof, Dmitri continued, that you're alive and unharmed, so you're going to make a phone call. You're going to tell him you're fine. And you're not going to say anything that might give him information about where you are or how many people are guarding you. Do we understand each other? Selene nodded because what else could she do? Dmitri handed her his phone. Make it convincing. The phone rang twice before Lucien answered. Selene. His voice was rough, like he'd been shouting or screaming or both. Hearing it made Selene's throat close up and tears burned behind her eyes. I'm here, she managed. Are you hurt? Did they hurt you? No, I'm okay. The baby's okay. She heard him let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in his chest since she disappeared. Where are you? I don't know. A warehouse somewhere. Lucien... Dmitri held up a hand, cutting her off. One finger across his throat in a gesture that needed no translation. I need you to listen to me, Selene said, choosing her words carefully. Whatever he's asking you to do, don't do it. Don't give him anything. Selene, I mean it. The empire you built, everything you have, it's not worth... Dmitri took the phone back. That's enough. Wait. Selene lunged for it, but the guard grabbed her and held her in the chair. She could hear Lucien's voice coming through the speaker, sharp and demanding, saying her name over and over. 24 hours, Dmitri said into the phone. Starting now. And Lucien? If you try anything creative, if you send your people to look for her, if you do anything except exactly what I've told you to do, she dies. The baby dies. And you get to live with that for the rest of your life. He hung up and pocketed the phone. Selene was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The guard's hands on her shoulders were the only thing keeping her upright. Get her somewhere she can rest, Dmitri said, and make sure she stays healthy. She's no good to us dead. The
The guard pulled Selene to her feet and half carried her to a smaller room off the main warehouse floor. It had a mattress on the floor and a single lamp and nothing else. He deposited her on the mattress and left without a word, locking the door behind him. Selene curled onto her side, her hands on her stomach, and finally let herself cry. Great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body and made the baby kick in protest. She cried for Lucien, who was probably tearing apart what was left of his organization trying to figure out how to save her. She cried for herself, trapped and terrified and so far out of her depth she couldn't even see the surface anymore. And she cried for her daughter, who hadn't even been born yet and was already caught in the middle of a war she had nothing to do with. Eventually, the tears stopped. Selene lay on the mattress and stared at the ceiling and tried to think. There had to be a way out of this. There had to be something she could do besides wait for either rescue or death. The baby shifted, rolling from one side to the other in the cramped space of Selene's womb. Selene put her hand where she'd felt the movement and whispered, "I'm going to get us out of this. I promise. I don't know how yet, but I'll figure something out." The baby kicked once, hard enough to hurt, like she believed her mother, or like she was saying, "Hurry up." Selene closed her eyes and tried to remember everything she'd learned about Dmitry Volkov from living with Lucien. The Russian was smart, ruthless, and patient. He didn't make moves without planning them 3 steps ahead, which meant he'd already considered every possible way Lucien might try to rescue her and had contingencies in place for all of them. But he'd made one mistake. He'd assumed Selene was helpless, that being pregnant made her weak and dependent on someone else to save her. He'd seen her as leverage and nothing more. He was about to find out how wrong he was. Selene sat up slowly and took stock of the room. The walls were concrete. The door was locked from the outside. But the ceiling was corrugated metal, the kind used in cheap warehouse construction, and there was a gap where it met the wall that looked just wide enough for someone determined enough to squeeze through. Someone who had spent years as a jazz singer traveling to dangerous cities and learning how to take care of herself when men got too aggressive. Someone who'd spent 14 months living on the streets and in shelters, learning to fight and claw and survive. Someone who had a daughter to protect. Selene stood up and started looking for anything she could use as a tool. And as she searched, she made herself a promise. She was getting out of here, with or without Lucien's help. And anyone who tried to stop her was going to regret it. The gap in the ceiling was smaller than Selene had hoped. She stood on the mattress, her fingers pressed against the corrugated metal, testing how much give it had. Not much, but enough that if she could find something to pry it with, she might be able to create an opening large enough to squeeze through. The problem was she had nothing. The room was deliberately empty except for the mattress and the lamp was bolted to the floor. She sat back down and felt the baby doing cartwheels against her ribs, restless and uncomfortable in the limited space. "I know," Selene whispered, her hand on her stomach. "I'm working on it." She lay back and tried to think like Lucien. What would he do in this situation? He'd find a weakness and exploit it. He'd use whatever resources he had, no matter how small. He'd be patient and wait for the right moment. Except Lucien had people and weapons and money. Selene had a mattress and a lamp she couldn't move. She closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe through the panic. There had to be something, some way to... The door lock clicked. Selene sat up fast enough to make her head spin. The guard from earlier stepped inside carrying a tray with a bottle of water and what looked like a sandwich. He set it on the floor near the mattress without looking at her. "Eat," he said. "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway. Boss's orders." He turned to leave and Selene heard herself say, "What's your name?" He stopped. Didn't turn around. "Doesn't matter." "It matters to me. I'd like to know the name of the man who sold me out." His shoulders went rigid. "I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice." "You don't know anything about my life." "Then tell me." He turned around then, and the look on his face was so full of self-loathing it was almost painful to see. He couldn't have been more than 25, with the kind of face that would have been boyish if it wasn't so hard around the edges. "My sister," he said quietly. "They have my sister. Dmitry's people grabbed her 2 days ago, said if I didn't do what they wanted, they'd kill her." Selene's anger cooled into something more complicated. "How old is she?" 19. She doesn't have anything to do with this world. She goes to community college, works part-time at a bookstore, and now she's locked in a room somewhere just like you because I couldn't protect her." "What's your name?" Selene asked again. "Ryan. Ryan,
I need you to listen to me very carefully. Dmitri isn't going to let your sister go, even if you do everything he asks. Men like him don't keep their word. I know. Ryan's voice cracked. But what else am I supposed to do? Let her die? Help me escape. I can get Lucien to find your sister. He has resources Dmitri doesn't. Connections. He can... No. Ryan backed toward the door. I can't. If I help you and Dmitri finds out, he'll kill her just to make a point.
He's going to kill her anyway. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because I know men like Dmitri. And the only thing they respect is fear. Right now you're useful. The moment you're not, both you and your sister become liabilities. Ryan stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head and left, locking the door behind him with a sound that felt like a death sentence. Selene picked up the water bottle and threw it at the door as hard as she could. It bounced off and rolled across the floor, water leaking out onto the concrete. The baby kicked in protest, and Selene put both hands on her stomach, trying to calm herself down. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, baby girl. She ate the sandwich because Ryan was right about one thing. She needed to keep her strength up. Then she lay back on the mattress and tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lucien's face when he'd realized she was gone. The fear, the fury, the absolute determination to get her back no matter what it cost. She wondered if he was already moving pieces on the board, making calls, pulling in favors, or if he was doing what Dmitri had told him to do and dismantling his empire piece by piece to buy her freedom. Either way, time was running out. Selene woke to the sound of shouting, not close, but not far enough away to ignore either. She sat up, her heart already racing, and pressed her ear against the door. Should have been here by now. That was Dmitri's voice, sharp with anger. Maybe he's stalling. Someone else. Another man with a Russian accent. He's not stalling. He's planning something. You think he'd be stupid enough to try a rescue? I think Lucien Draven would burn this entire city down to get her back. So yes, I think he's stupid enough. Footsteps. Coming closer. Selene backed away from the door and sat on the mattress, trying to look like she'd been sleeping. The lock clicked, and Dmitri walked in with 2 guards flanking him. Get up, he said. Selene stood slowly, her hand on the wall for balance. What's happening? Your boyfriend is making things complicated. So you're going to make another phone call, and this time you're going to convince him to stop playing games. I already told him not to give you anything. Then tell him the opposite. Tell him you're in pain. Tell him the baby's in distress. Tell him whatever it takes to make him cooperate before I decide you're more trouble than you're worth. Dmitri held out his phone. Selene took it with shaking hands and pressed it to her ear. It rang 3 times before Lucien answered. Selene. His voice was rougher than before, like he'd been awake for days straight. I'm here. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? We're fine. Lucien, listen to me. I'm working on it, he said, cutting her off. I'm getting you out of there. I just need a little more time. You don't have time. He's getting impatient. You need to give him what he wants. I can't do that. Yes, you can. The territory, the connections, all of it. It's just business, Lucien. It's not worth dying for. You are. I'm not asking you to die for me. I'm asking you to let go. Walk away. Start over somewhere else. There is no somewhere else. Not for men like me. Dmitri grabbed the phone back before Selene could respond. You have 12 hours left, Draven, not 24. 12. And if you're not here with everything I asked for, I start cutting pieces off your girlfriend until you show up with a better attitude. He hung up and pocketed the phone. Then he backhanded Selene hard enough to knock her into the wall. She slid down to the floor, her vision white and her ears ringing, one hand instinctively going to her stomach. That, Dmitri said, standing over her, is for thinking I'm stupid enough to believe your little performance. You think I can't hear the difference between a woman who's begging for her life and a woman who's buying time? Next time you lie to me, I'll do worse than slap you. He walked out and his guards followed, leaving Selene on the floor with blood in her mouth and her cheek already swelling. She sat there for a long time, waiting for the room to stop spinning. When it finally did, she pulled herself up using the wall and went to the mattress, lying down on her side with her hand on her stomach. The baby was moving frantically, rolling and kicking like she was trying to escape her mother's body. Selene rubbed circles on her stomach and whispered soothing nonsense until the movement slowed. "We're going to be okay," she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it anymore. "Your daddy's going to come get us. He's going to tear this place apart and get us out of here, and everything's going to be fine." The baby kicked once, hard, like she was calling bullshit. Hours crawled past like wounded animals. Selene dozed and woke and dozed again, her sleep broken and full of nightmares. Ryan came back with more food and water, but didn't say anything, just left the tray and disappeared. The light from the single lamp never changed, making it impossible to tell if it was day or night outside. Finally, Selene heard vehicles pulling up outside the warehouse. Lots of them, doors slamming, voices shouting orders. She sat up and pressed her ear against the door, trying to make sense of the chaos. "In position? All teams ready. Where's Draven?" "5 minutes out." Selene's heart kicked into overdrive. Lucien was coming. He'd done what Dimitri asked, or he was planning something, or both. But he was coming. She pressed both hands against her stomach and whispered, "Hold on, baby girl. Just hold on a little longer." The lock clicked and Ryan opened the door. He looked worse than before, like he hadn't slept since the last time she'd seen him. "Come on," he said. "Boss wants you in the main room." Selene let him help her to her feet and followed him out into the warehouse. What had been relatively empty before was now packed with armed men, at least 20 of them, all positioned around the space like they were expecting a war. Dimitri stood near the main entrance, watching something on his phone with an expression that made Selene's blood run cold. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "Ah, perfect timing. Your boyfriend just pulled up." Through the warehouse's grimy windows, Selene could see headlights cutting through the dark. A black SUV, identical to the one that had brought her to the safe house. It stopped about 50 yards from the entrance and the engine cut off. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened and Lucien stepped out. He was alone. No guards. No backup that Selene could see. Just Lucien, in a dark suit that looked like he'd slept in it, walking toward the warehouse with his hands visible and empty. He looked like hell. Face drawn, eyes shadowed, moving with the kind of exhaustion that came from running on pure adrenaline for too long. When he was about 20 feet from the entrance, Dimitri's men surrounded him, patting him down for weapons. They found a gun at his hip, a knife in his boot, and another gun at his ankle. They took all of it and stepped back. Dimitri opened the warehouse door himself. "Lucien, how good of you to join us." Lucien's eyes went straight to Selene. He took in the bruise on her face, the way she was holding her stomach protectively, and something in his expression cracked. "You hit her," he said quietly. She needed to be reminded who was in charge. "But as you can see, she's fine. The baby's fine. Now, did you bring what I asked for?" Lucien pulled a tablet from inside his jacket and held it out. "Everything, territory deeds, distribution contacts, shipping routes, access codes to my offshore accounts. It's all there." Dimitri took the tablet and handed it to one of his men to verify. "And the Korean connection? I set up a meeting. 3 days from now. You'll have full access to their network." "Good." Dimitri studied Lucien like he was an interesting insect. "I have to admit, I didn't think you'd actually do it. I thought your pride would get in the way." "My pride isn't worth her life." "How touching." Dimitri gestured to Ryan. "Bring her over here." Ryan hesitated for just a second, then grabbed Selene's arm and walked her across the warehouse floor. When they got close enough, Lucien reached out like he was going to touch her, and Ryan yanked her back. "Not yet," Dimitri said. "First, I need to make sure everything on this tablet is legitimate. If it is, you can have your girlfriend back. If it's not, I'll kill her in front of you and then kill you slowly enough that you'll beg me to finish it." "It's all real," Lucien said. His voice was steady, but his hands were clenched into fists. "I gave you everything. Now let her go." Dimitri smiled. "See, that's where you made a mistake. You assumed I was a man of my word, that if you gave me what I wanted, I'd just hand over the woman carrying your child and let you both walk out of here. But I'm a businessman, Lucien, and from a business perspective, killing you both sends a much stronger message than letting you live." Lucien's expression didn't change, but Selene saw his jaw tighten. "You'll start a war. The people who work for me won't let this stand. The people who work for you just watched you hand over your entire empire to save one woman. They don't respect you anymore. They'll fold into my organization within a week." "You're wrong." "Am I?"
Dmitri nodded to his men. Kill him. Everything happened at once. The windows along the east wall exploded inward in a spray of glass and gunfire. Lucien dove toward Selene, tackling her to the ground and covering her body with his as bullets tore through the air above them. Dmitri's men scattered, returning fire at targets Selene couldn't see through the smoke and chaos. Lucien rolled them behind a concrete pillar and pulled her into his arms, his hand on her stomach. Are you hurt? No, what's happening? My people. I wasn't going to let you die here. But you gave him everything. I gave him a tablet full of fake information and accounts that'll drain themselves into untraceable shells the moment he tries to access them. I was never going to give him my empire, Selene. I was just buying time until my team could get in position. Another explosion rocked the building. Part of the roof collapsed, raining concrete and metal onto the warehouse floor. Selene heard screaming. Someone was on fire. The smell of gasoline and burning flesh made her gag. Lucien pulled her to her feet and started moving toward the back of the warehouse, keeping low and using the pillars for cover. Behind them, Selene could hear Dmitri shouting orders in Russian, his voice high and furious. They were almost to the back exit when Ryan stepped out in front of them, his gun raised and pointed directly at Lucien's chest. Don't, Ryan said. His hands were shaking. Don't move. Lucien froze. Get out of the way. I can't. My sister, they'll kill my sister if I let you go. They're going to kill her anyway. You know that. I have to try. Then shoot me, but let Selene go first. Ryan's finger tightened on the trigger and Selene saw the exact moment he made his decision. She lunged forward, putting herself between the gun and Lucien, and heard Lucien shout her name. The gun went off. The bullet caught Selene high on her left side, just below her ribs. The impact spun her around and dropped her to her knees. She heard someone screaming and realized it was her. The pain was white-hot, spreading through her chest and stomach like liquid fire. Lucien caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her gently while shouting for a medic. Above them, Ryan stood frozen, the gun still raised, his face white with shock. I didn't mean, he started. Lucien pulled a knife from somewhere and drove it into Ryan's throat in one smooth motion. Ryan dropped, gurgling, blood pouring between his fingers. Lucien didn't even watch him fall. He was already pressing his hands against Selene's side, trying to stop the bleeding. Stay with me, he said. Selene, stay with me. Look at me. She tried to focus on his face, but everything was getting dark around the edges. The baby was moving frantically, rolling and kicking, and Selene thought distantly that at least she was still alive. The baby, she managed. The baby's going to be fine. You're both going to be fine. I'm getting you out of here. Someone appeared beside Lucien, a man in tactical gear with a medical kit. He pushed Lucien's hands away and started working on the wound, moving fast and efficient. Selene felt pressure, felt her shirt being cut away, felt hands on her stomach checking for other injuries. Entry wound, no exit, the medic said. Bullet's still in there. She needs surgery. Then get her to surgery, Lucien said. We're in the middle of a war zone. I don't care if we're in the middle of hell. Get her to surgery, or I'll kill you and find someone who will. The medic nodded and pulled out a radio, calling for an extraction team. Lucien gathered Selene into his arms like she weighed nothing and started moving again, stepping over bodies and debris. The gunfire had stopped, but the building was burning now, smoke pouring through the holes in the roof. They made it outside into air that felt like ice against Selene's skin. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Lucien laid her in the back of another SUV and climbed in beside her, his hands never leaving her body. Drive, he said to someone in the front seat. Mercy Hospital, and don't stop for anything. The SUV took off fast enough to throw Selene against the door. Lucien caught her and held her against his chest, one hand on her wound and the other on her stomach. She could feel his heart racing, could hear him whispering something that sounded like a prayer but might have just been her name over and over. Lucien, she managed, don't talk. Save your strength. If I don't make it, you're going to make it. If I don't, promise me you'll take care of her. Promise me she'll have a better life than we did. Selene, promise me. His face was wet. She realized he was crying, tears running down his face and onto hers. I promise. But you're going to be there to raise her with me. Do you hear me? You're going to be fine. Selene wanted to believe him, but the darkness was closing in from all sides now.
narrowing her vision down to just his face. She tried to hold on to it, but it was slipping away like water through her fingers. The last thing she heard before everything went black was Lucien's voice breaking as he said her name. She woke up to white ceiling tiles and the smell of antiseptic. For a moment she didn't remember where she was or why everything hurt. Then it all came rushing back. The warehouse, Ryan, the gunshot, Lucien's face above her wet with tears. Selene tried to sit up, and pain exploded through her side, driving her back down onto the pillows. She gasped, and a hand appeared in her peripheral vision, gentle on her shoulder. Easy, Lucien's voice, rough and exhausted, but there. She turned her head and found him sitting in a chair beside her hospital bed. He looked terrible. Still wearing the blood-stained suit, his hair standing up like he'd been dragging his hands through it for hours, dark circles under his eyes that looked like bruises. How long? Her voice came out as a croak. 36 hours. You've been in and out. They had to do surgery to remove the bullet. It nicked your spleen but missed everything vital. He leaned forward, his hand finding hers on the blanket. The baby's okay. They monitored her heartbeat through the whole thing. She's strong, Selene. Just like her mother. Selene closed her eyes and felt tears leak out. I thought we were going to die. So did I. Ryan is dead. So is Dmitry Volkov and most of his inner circle. The rest scattered. It's going to take them months to reorganize, if they even bother trying. His sister? Lucien was quiet for a moment. We found her. Too late. I'm sorry. Selene thought about Ryan's face when he'd shot her. The shock, the horror. He'd been trying to save his sister and ended up getting them both killed anyway. It's not your fault, Lucien said, reading her expression. Isn't it? I pushed him. Told him Dmitry would kill her anyway. Maybe if I'd just stayed quiet. Then you'd still be locked in that room waiting to be executed. Ryan made his choices, Selene. We all did. Now we have to live with them. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the weight of those choices written across his face. What happens now? Now you heal. The doctor says you'll need at least 2 weeks before you can leave the hospital. Maybe longer, depending on how the incision heals. And after that, Lucien's hand tightened on hers. After that, we figure it out. Together. You don't have an empire anymore. You gave Dmitry everything. I gave him fake information. But you were right about one thing. My people saw me trade everything to try to save you. Some of them will see that as weakness. Others will use it as an excuse to push for more power. The organization I built is going to tear itself apart from the inside unless I go back and hold it together. So go back. I can't. Not after what happened. Not after I almost lost you. He stood up and paced to the window, staring out at the city. For 14 months, I told myself I was looking for you to make sure you were safe. But the truth is, I was looking for you because I couldn't function without you. Because everything I built meant nothing if you weren't there to share it with. Lucien, I love you, Selene. I've loved you since the night I heard you sing in that hotel bar, and you looked at me like I was just a man instead of a monster, and I'm tired of pretending I can be both. The kingpin who runs this city and the man who deserves you. He turned back to face her, and the look in his eyes was so raw it hurt. So I'm walking away. From all of it. The territory, the business, the men who followed me for years. I'm done. Selene stared at him. You can't just walk away. It doesn't work like that. Watch me. They'll come after you, the people who want your position, the ones who think you owe them something. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Then that's what I'll do. As long as you and our daughter are safe, I don't care about the rest. But I care. Selena pushed herself up despite the pain, needing to see his face clearly. I didn't leave you because I wanted you to give up everything you built. I left because I couldn't live in a world where violence was the answer to every problem, where people died because they got in your way. Then what do you want from me? I want you to be better. Not different. Better. She took a breath, trying to find the right words. You built an empire on fear and blood. What if you could build something else? Something that actually helped people instead of destroying them? That's not who I am. It could be, if you wanted it badly enough. Lucien was quiet for a long time. Then he crossed back to the bed and sat on the edge of it, careful not to jostle her. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe there's a middle ground between the man who runs a criminal empire and the man who walks away from everything. Maybe you could use all that power and all those connections for something that doesn't end in people dying. You're talking about going legitimate. I'm talking about using what you have to build something that our daughter won't have to run from when she's old enough to understand what her father does. He studied her face like he was trying to figure out if she was serious. That would take years. And it would mean making enemies of people who currently see me as an ally. I know. It would be dangerous, maybe more dangerous than what we just survived. I know that too. And you'd stay? Even though it means staying in this world? Selene reached up and touched his face, running her thumb along the edge of his jaw. I never wanted to leave you, Lucien. I wanted to leave what you'd become. If you can find a way to be someone our daughter can be proud of, then yes. I'll stay. He caught her hand and pressed his lips against her palm. I don't know if I can do it. Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time. Before Lucien could respond, the door opened and Dr. Morrison walked in carrying a chart. She looked between them and raised an eyebrow. Am I interrupting? No, Selene said. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but I need to talk to you about the baby. Selene's heart stopped. Is she okay? She's fine. Better than fine, actually. But the stress from the gunshot wound triggered some early contractions. They've stopped for now, but there's a possibility you could go into premature labor in the next few days. How early? You're 33 weeks. If you deliver now, the baby would need to spend some time in the NICU, but her chances are excellent. Dr. Morrison set the chart down and looked at Selene seriously. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but you need to be prepared for the possibility. What do we do? Rest. Stay calm. Let your body heal. And if you feel any contractions or your water breaks, you call me immediately. She glanced at Lucien. That goes for you too. Any sign that something's wrong, I want to know about it. You'll be the first call I make, Lucien said. After Dr. Morrison left, Selene lay back against the pillows and put both hands on her stomach. The baby was moving, slower than usual, but still there, still fighting. She's early, Selene said quietly. She's a survivor, just like her mother. What if something goes wrong? What if she's not ready to be born yet? Then we'll deal with it, together. Lucien moved his hand to her stomach, covering hers. But she's going to be fine, Selene. She's already survived more than most people do in a lifetime. A few weeks early isn't going to stop her. Selene wanted to believe him. She closed her eyes and tried to relax, tried to let go of the fear that had been her constant companion for the past 2 days. But every time she started to drift off, she saw Ryan's face, heard the gunshot, felt the bullet tearing through her body. I can't stop thinking about him, she admitted. Ryan? He was just trying to save his sister, and I told him it was hopeless. That Dimitri would kill her anyway. Maybe if I'd said something different, you'd both be dead, and our daughter would be dead, and I'd be tearing the city apart trying to find your bodies. Lucien's voice was hard. Ryan made a choice when he agreed to betray me. He knew the risks, and when it came down to it, he chose wrong. That's not on you. But his sister was dead the moment Dimitri took her. Men like him don't take hostages to exchange them later. They take them to have leverage, and when that leverage runs out, they dispose of the evidence. He paused. I know you want to believe there was a way to save everyone, but there wasn't. Sometimes the only choice is who lives and who dies. And I will always choose you. The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it just made Selene feel hollow, because she understood what he was saying, even if she didn't want to. In Lucien's world, there were no good choices, just lesser evils and the people strong enough to make them. I don't want our daughter growing up in a world where those are the only options, she said. Then we'll make sure she doesn't have to. Lucien leaned down and kissed her forehead. Get some rest. I'll be right here. Selene closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't shut off. She kept thinking about everything that had happened. The explosion at the penthouse, the safe house that wasn't safe, Ryan's shaking hands on the gun, the look on Dimitri's face when he'd said he was going to kill them both. And underneath all of it, the baby rolling and kicking, a constant reminder that Selene wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She must have dozed off eventually because the next thing she knew, the room was dark except for the glow of medical equipment and the city lights coming through the window. Lucien was still in the chair beside her bed, but he wasn't sleeping. He was on his phone, speaking in low tones to someone about perimeter security and hospital access points. Selene listened with her eyes closed, picking up fragments of the conversation. Someone named Marcus was handling things at the hospital. Another team was sweeping Lucien's remaining properties for explosives or tracking devices. A third group was dealing with the police, who apparently had questions about the warehouse fire and the bodies found inside. When Lucien hung up, Selene said, "You're not sleeping." He looked over at her, his face shadowed. "Neither are you. I keep having nightmares." "About what?" "Everything. The warehouse. Ryan. Dimitri saying he was going to cut pieces off me until you cooperated." She shivered. "And the baby. I keep dreaming she's born, but something's wrong with her because of the gunshot wound." Lucien stood up and climbed onto the hospital bed beside her, careful of her injuries. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her against his chest. "Dr. Morrison said she's fine. The bullet didn't go anywhere near your uterus." "I know, but I can't stop thinking about all the things that could go wrong." "Then think about all the things that could go right. She's healthy. You're healing. We're both alive. That's more than I thought we'd have 48 hours ago." Selene pressed her face against his chest and breathed in the smell of him, expensive cologne mixed with blood and smoke and fear. "I'm scared." "I know, so am I." "You don't look scared." "I'm terrified. I've been terrified since the moment that window exploded and I realized someone was trying to kill you. I'm just better at hiding it." They lay in silence for a while, the sounds of the hospital filtering through the door. Footsteps in the hallway, a cart being wheeled past, someone crying in a room nearby. Finally, Selene said, "What happens when we leave here?" "I have a place outside the city, secure, private. We go there until you're healed and the baby comes." "And after that?" "After that, we figure out what comes next. If you want to try building something legitimate out of what's left of my organization, we'll try. If you want to disappear and start over somewhere no one knows our names, we'll do that instead. What do you want?" Lucien was quiet for so long, Selene thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "I want to wake up next to you every morning without wondering if today's the day someone tries to kill us. I want to teach our daughter how to ride a bike and help her with her homework and watch her grow up into someone who doesn't have to be afraid of her own shadow. I want a life that isn't measured in territory held and enemies eliminated." That's a lot of wanting for a man who spent the last decade building an empire. Empires fall. Family is forever. The words hit Selene harder than she expected. She turned her head to look at him and found him staring at the ceiling with an expression that looked like grief. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking about my sister, about how I failed her, how I let her die because I was too focused on building power to see the danger until it was too late." He closed his eyes. "I won't make that mistake again. Not with you. Not with our daughter." Selene didn't know what to say to that, so she just held on to him and let the silence stretch out between them. Eventually, she felt herself starting to drift, the exhaustion finally catching up with her. She was almost asleep when the first contraction hit. It started as a tightening across her stomach, uncomfortable but not quite painful. Selene tensed and Lucien felt it immediately. "What's wrong?" "I don't know. My stomach just..." Another contraction, stronger this time. Selene gasped and grabbed Lucien's arm as the pain rolled through her abdomen in a wave that peaked and then slowly faded. Lucien was already reaching for the call button. "You're having contractions. It's probably just Braxton Hicks, false labor. Dr. Morrison said it could happen. Or it's real labor, and you're about to have our daughter 7 weeks early." A nurse appeared in the doorway, took one look at Selene's face, and immediately went to check the monitors. "How far apart are they?" "I don't know. That was only the second one." The nurse pulled back Selene's blanket and started examining her, checking dilation and the baby's position with the kind of clinical efficiency that should have been reassuring but just made Selene more anxious. "You're at 3 centimeters, the nurse said, "which means this is active labor. I'm going to page Dr. Morrison, and we'll get you moved to a delivery room." "Wait, I can't be in labor. I'm not ready. The baby's not ready." "The baby's ready enough. 33 weeks isn't ideal, but it's not catastrophic either. We have an excellent NICU team." Another contraction hit, and this time Selene couldn't hold back the cry that escaped her throat. It felt like someone had wrapped a belt around her stomach and was pulling it tighter and tighter until she couldn't breathe. Lucien grabbed her hand and she squeezed hard enough to hurt. "Breathe," he said. "In through your nose, out through your mouth." "I know how to breathe," Selene managed through gritted teeth. "Then do it."
The contraction peaked and faded. Selene lay back against the pillows, her whole body shaking. This is too fast. Labor's supposed to take hours. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. The nurse was already unhooking monitors and preparing to move the bed. Have you been feeling any contractions before this? Just some cramping earlier. I thought it was normal. It probably was, but the stress your body went through from the gunshot wound has likely pushed you into early labor. The good news is your baby seems eager to meet you. They moved Selene to a delivery room that looked exactly like every hospital room she'd ever seen on television. Harsh lights, equipment everywhere, a bed with stirrups that made her want to cry just looking at them. Lucien stayed beside her the entire time, his hand in hers, his voice low and steady as the contractions got closer together and more intense. Dr. Morrison arrived 20 minutes later, already wearing scrubs. She examined Selene and frowned. You're at 6 centimeters. You're progressing fast. At this rate, you'll be ready to push within the next few hours. Hours? Selene felt the panic rising. I can't do this for hours. Yes, you can. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. You're strong. You'll get through it. Another contraction hit, and Selene arched off the bed, her hand clamping down on Lucien's hard enough that she heard him hiss in pain. The wave built and built until it felt like her entire body was trying to turn inside out, and then finally it crested and fell away, leaving her gasping. I can't do this, she said when she could breathe again. Yes, you can, Lucien said. No, I mean it. I can't. It hurts too much. I know it hurts, but you're the strongest person I've ever met. If anyone can do this, it's you. Easy for you to say. You're not the one. Another contraction cut off whatever she was going to say. She grabbed onto Lucien with both hands and rode it out, making sounds she didn't know she was capable of making. The hours blurred together into a haze of pain and exhaustion. Selene lost track of time, lost track of everything except the contractions that kept coming in waves that seemed to get bigger and more brutal with each one. Lucien stayed beside her through all of it, letting her crush his hand, wiping the sweat from her face, telling her she was doing great even when she screamed at him that he had no idea what he was talking about. Finally, Dr. Morrison said the words Selene had been waiting to hear. You're at 10 centimeters. It's time to push. I can't. Yes, you can. Your daughter is right there. She's ready to be born. All you have to do is push her out. Selene wanted to argue, but another contraction hit, and Dr. Morrison was telling her to push, to bear down, to give it everything she had. So she did. She pushed until she saw stars, until her entire body screamed in protest, until she was sure something was going to tear. Good, Dr. Morrison said. Again, push. Selene pushed again, and again, and again. Time lost all meaning. There was just the burning pressure and the pain, and Lucien Draven's voice in her ear telling her she could do this. She was almost there, just a little bit more. I can see the head, Dr. Morrison said. One more big push should do it. On the next contraction, give me everything you've got. The next contraction built like a tsunami. Selene felt it coming and gathered what little strength she had left. When Dr. Morrison told her to push, she pushed harder than she'd ever pushed anything in her life. And then suddenly the pressure was gone, and there was a different kind of sound in the room. High and thin and absolutely furious. It's a girl, Dr. Morrison said, holding up a tiny, screaming, perfect baby covered in blood and vernix. Selene started crying. She couldn't help it. The baby was so small, so fragile looking, with a shock of dark hair and eyes squeezed shut against the harsh lights. The NICU team was already moving in, taking the baby to check her vitals and make sure everything was functioning properly. Is she okay? Selene managed. She's perfect, Dr. Morrison said, working on delivering the placenta. A little small, but her lungs sound good and she's fighting like crazy. That's exactly what we want to see. Lucien was standing beside the NICU team, watching them work on his daughter with an expression Selene had never seen on his face before. Wonder and terror and something that looked like it might break him completely. One of the NICU nurses came over carrying a bundle wrapped in blankets. 5 pounds, 3 ounces. She'll need to stay in the NICU for observation, but you can hold her for a minute first. She placed the baby in Selene's arms and the world narrowed down to just the tiny warm weight against her chest. The baby had stopped crying and was making soft snuffling sounds, her little fists waving in the air. Hi,
Selene whispered. "Hi, baby girl. I'm your mom." The baby's eyes opened, unfocused but searching. Selene felt something in her chest crack wide open, something huge and terrifying and more powerful than anything she'd ever felt before. "Lucien," she said. He came to the bedside and looked down at his daughter with tears running down his face. "She's beautiful. She's perfect." Selene adjusted the blankets so Lucien could see the baby's face better. "Do you want to hold her?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. Selene handed their daughter over and watched as Lucien cradled her against his chest like she was made of glass. He was shaking. This man who'd built an empire on fear and violence, completely undone by a 5-pound baby girl. "Hello," he whispered to her. "I'm your father. And I promise I'm going to do everything in my power to give you a better life than the one I had. You're never going to have to be afraid. You're never going to have to wonder if you're safe. And you're never going to doubt that you're loved." The baby made a soft sound, and Lucien completely broke down, sobbing like his heart was tearing in half. The NICU nurse came back. "I'm sorry, but we really do need to take her now. She needs to be in an incubator while we monitor her breathing and blood sugar." Lucien handed the baby over like it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Then he turned to Selene and buried his face in her shoulder, still crying. "We did it," Selene said, running her hands through his hair. "She's here. She's safe." "I know, He couldn't finish the sentence. Selene held on to him and watched the NICU team wheel their daughter out of the delivery room. She felt empty and full at the same time, exhausted and wired, more terrified than she'd been in the warehouse because at least then the only person at risk was her. Now she had a daughter to protect, a tiny, fragile life that depended on her and Lucien to keep her safe in a world that had already tried to kill them all twice. "What are we going to name her?" Lucien asked, his voice muffled against Selene's shoulder. Selene thought about it, about the past 48 hours, about Ryan's sister who died for nothing, about Lucien's sister who he'd never stopped mourning, about all the people who'd been destroyed by the world they lived in. "Hope," she said finally. "Her name is Hope, because that's what she is. Hope for something better." Lucien lifted his head and looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Hope Draven." "Hope Draven," Selene agreed, and as she said it, she felt something shift inside her, a certainty that maybe, just maybe, they could actually build the kind of life their daughter deserved. Or they would die trying. The NICU was on the 4th floor, a sterile fortress of glass incubators and beeping monitors, where babies too small or too sick fought their first battles against a world that had welcomed them too early. Selene stood outside the unit, her hand pressed against the viewing window, watching nurses move between the tiny bodies with practiced efficiency. Hope was in Incubator 7, a clear plastic box that made her look even smaller than she was. Lucien stood beside her, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides like he wanted to punch through the glass and grab his daughter back. "She's so small." 5 pounds, 3 ounces. Dr. Morrison said that's actually good for 33 weeks. "She looks like I could break her just by breathing on her." "You won't." Selene leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion, making her bones feel like they were made of lead. The gunshot wound in her side throbbed with every heartbeat, but she'd refused the heavy painkillers because she wanted to be alert, wanted to be present for every moment of her daughter's life, even the terrifying ones. A nurse came out of the NICU and approached them with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You can come in and touch her if you want. Skin-to-skin contact is good for premature babies." They followed her through the double doors into a world of hushed voices and mechanical breathing. Hope was awake, her tiny eyes open and unfocused, her miniature fists waving slowly like she was trying to grab onto something she couldn't quite see. Selene reached through the ports in the incubator and touched her daughter's chest, feeling the rapid flutter of her heartbeat beneath her fingertip. "Hey, baby girl," she whispered. "It's Mom. I'm right here." Hope turned her head towards Selene's voice and made a soft sound that might have been recognition or might have been gas. Selene felt tears burning in her eyes again. She'd been crying so much in the past 2 days she was surprised she had any moisture left in her body. Lucien reached in through the other port and stroked Hope's tiny hand with one finger. She grabbed onto it immediately, her grip surprisingly strong. He went completely still, staring down at their daughter with an expression that looked like someone had just shown him something he'd never believed existed. "She's holding my hand," he said quietly. Babies do that. It's a reflex. I don't care what it is. She's holding my hand. They stood like that for a long time, connected to their daughter through holes in a plastic box, until a different nurse came over and told them gently that Hope needed to rest, and so did Selene. They left the NICU and went back to Selene's hospital room, where she collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep before Lucien even got the blanket over her. She woke up 6 hours later to voices arguing outside her door. One was Lucien's. The other was male and unfamiliar and getting progressively louder. Don't care what you're dealing with personally. The Koreans are threatening to pull out of the meeting entirely if you don't show up. Then let them pull out. That was Lucien, his voice flat and cold. You can't be serious. This deal has been in the works for 8 months. It's worth 40 million minimum. I said let them pull out, Marcus. Lucien, listen to yourself. A week ago, you would have killed anyone who threatened this deal. Now you're just going to walk away? A week ago, I didn't have a daughter fighting for her life in the NICU. She's fine. The doctor said she's fine. She's 5 pounds and breathing with the help of a machine. That's not fine. Selene pushed herself up despite the pain screaming through her side and opened the door. Marcus stood in the hallway, a man in his 40s with the kind of face that looked like it had been in too many fights. He was wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the bulge of a shoulder holster.
How long have you been out here? She asked. Marcus looked at her like he wanted to say something cutting, but thought better of it. Long enough to know your boyfriend's about to throw away the biggest opportunity we've had in years. Then maybe it's not the right opportunity. With all due respect, Ms. Vale, you don't know anything about this business. No. But I know enough about Lucien to know that if he's walking away from $40 million, he has a good reason. The reason is he's gone soft. Ever since you came back into his life, he's been making decisions based on emotion instead of logic. Lucien stepped between them, his voice dropping into a register that made the temperature in the hallway feel like it had dropped 10 degrees. You want to keep talking, or you want to keep your job? Marcus held up both hands. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You've changed, Lucien, and people are starting to notice. Let them notice. Some of them are starting to wonder if you're still fit to lead. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Lucien took a step closer to Marcus, and the older man actually backed up. Are you one of them? No, but I can't speak for the others. Then maybe it's time I had a conversation with the others, set up a meeting. Everyone who's been with me longer than 2 years, tonight. Lucien, tonight, Marcus, or you can walk away right now and find somewhere else to peddle your concerns. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Lucien's expression stopped him. He nodded once and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hospital corridor. Selene waited until he was gone before saying, "What was that about?" Exactly what it sounded like. My organization is fracturing. They think I've lost my edge because I chose you over business. Have you? Lucien looked at her, and the raw honesty in his eyes made her breath catch. Yes, but I'd make the same choice 100 times over. Even if it costs you everything you built. Everything I built was meaningless without you. I just didn't realize it until you were gone. Selene wanted to say something comforting, but the words stuck in her throat. Because the truth was, Marcus wasn't wrong. Lucien had changed. The man who'd torn apart Chicago looking for her wasn't the same man who'd built an empire on fear and violence. And the people who'd followed him because of that empire weren't going to just accept the new version. What are you going to do? She asked. What I should have done a long time ago. Make it clear that anyone who has a problem with my choices can leave or die. Their pick. Lucien. This is who I am, Selene. I can try to be better. I can walk away from some of the worst parts of this life. But I can't change the fact that sometimes violence is the only language these men understand. He cupped her face in both hands, gentle despite the hardness in his voice. I need to handle this. Can you stay here with Hope while I go deal with it? Where are you going? One of my warehouses on the south side. Neutral territory where everyone can speak freely without worrying about being overheard. That sounds like a trap. It probably is, but I can't let this fester. If I don't address it now, someone's going to make a move when I'm least prepared for it. Selene grabbed his wrist. Then take more security. Take everyone loyal to you. I am. Marcus is setting it up now. I don't trust Marcus. Neither do I. But he's been with me since the beginning, and if he was going to betray me, he's had a dozen better opportunities than this. Lucien kissed her forehead. I'll be back before midnight. Get some rest. Visit Hope. And if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately.
He left before Selene could argue further. She stood in the doorway and watched him disappear down the corridor, every instinct she had screaming that this was a mistake. But she didn't have the energy to chase after him, and even if she did, he wouldn't listen. Lucien had made up his mind. Selene went back to the NICU and spent the next 3 hours sitting beside Hope's incubator, her hand through the port touching her daughter's tiny chest. The baby slept most of the time, but occasionally her eyes would flutter open and she'd make soft sounds that the nurses said were perfectly normal. Around 8 o'clock, Selene's phone buzzed with a text from Lucien. Meeting starting. Everything's fine. Love you. She typed back, love you too. Be careful, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. 2 hours later, her phone rang. Not Lucien. A number she didn't recognize. Selene answered it with her pulse already racing. Hello? Ms. Vale. The voice was male, older, with an accent she couldn't place. My name is Alexei Volkov. I believe you met my brother Dmitri before he died. Selene's blood went cold. What do you want? I want to talk to you about Lucien Draven. Specifically, I want to explain why he's not going to be coming back from his meeting tonight. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that half the men at that warehouse are on my payroll now, and in approximately 10 minutes, they're going to kill everyone loyal to Lucien and take over what's left of his organization. Your boyfriend walked into a trap, Ms. Vale, and you're never going to see him alive again. The phone slipped from Selene's hand and clattered onto the floor. One of the nurses looked over with concern, but Selene was already running, or trying to. Her side screamed in protest, and her legs felt like they were made of rubber. She made it to the elevator before a nurse caught up with her. Ms. Vale, you can't leave. You just had surgery. I have to. Selene punched the button for the ground floor. Someone's in trouble. I have to go. You're in no condition to go anywhere. Let me call security. There's no time. The elevator doors opened and Selene stumbled out into the lobby, looking for the exit. Her vision was graying at the edges and she could feel something warm and wet spreading across her side. The stitches had probably torn. She didn't care. A security guard stepped in front of her. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Get out of my way. You're bleeding. We need to get you back upstairs. Selene tried to push past him, but her legs gave out. She would have hit the floor if someone hadn't caught her. Strong hands, familiar cologne. She looked up and found herself staring into Marcus's face. Easy, he said. I've got you. Where's Lucien? At the warehouse. Where he's supposed to be. It's a trap. Alexei Volkov called me. He said half the men there are working for him now. He said they're going to kill Lucien. The words came out in a rush, tripping over each other. We have to warn him. We have to. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He tried another number, same result. His expression went from concern to grim. Come on, he said, half carrying her toward the exit. We need to move. I can't. My daughter. She's safe here. Lucien won't be if we don't get to that warehouse in the next 5 minutes. The security guard tried to stop them, but Marcus flashed a gun and the man backed off. They made it to a black SUV idling outside the emergency room entrance. Marcus shoved Selene into the passenger seat and climbed behind the wheel, peeling out of the parking lot before she even had her seatbelt fastened. How far is the warehouse? Selene managed. 10 minutes if I ignore every traffic law. Marcus was already doing 90 down a street that was posted for 35. How did Alexei get your number? I don't know. How did he turn half of Lucien's men? Money, or fear, or both. The Volkovs don't mess around when they want something. How many men does Lucien have with him? 12. If Alexei is telling the truth about having half of them, that's 6 against 6. Better odds than I thought. The warehouse was exactly where Lucien had said it would be. Southside, industrial district, a squat concrete building that looked like it had been manufacturing something toxic before whatever company owned it went bankrupt and fled. Every window was dark. The parking lot was full of vehicles, but there was no sign of movement. Marcus killed the headlights and coasted to a stop behind a semi-truck that provided cover. Stay here. No. Selene, he's my... She didn't have a word for what Lucien was. Boyfriend felt too casual. Husband was legally inaccurate. I'm not staying in the car. Marcus looked at her like he wanted to argue but didn't have time. He pulled a second gun from under the seat and handed it to her. Do you know how to use this? Point and shoot? Close enough. He checked his own weapon, chambered around, and opened his door. Stay behind me. If shooting starts, get down and stay down. And for the love of everything, don't get yourself killed or Lucien will murder me and then resurrect me just to kill me again. They moved toward the warehouse in a crouch, using the parked cars for cover. Selene's side was on fire, but adrenaline had kicked in hard enough that she could almost ignore it. Almost. The side door to the warehouse was propped open with a brick. Marcus approached it slowly, checking for tripwires or cameras. When he was satisfied it was clear, he slipped inside with Selene right behind him. The interior was one massive open space, broken up by support pillars and lit by industrial lights hanging from the ceiling. In the center, two groups of men faced each other across about 20 feet of concrete. Lucien stood with 5 others, their hands near their weapons but not drawing yet. Across from them were 6 more men, and in front of them stood someone Selene assumed was Alexei Volkov. He looked nothing like his brother. Where Dmitri had been polished and sophisticated, Alexei looked like a brawler who'd clawed his way up from the streets. Scar across his jaw, crooked nose, eyes that were flat and dead in a way that made Dmitri seem warm by comparison. Trying to understand your position here, Draven? Alexei's voice carried across the warehouse. You gave my brother fake information. You orchestrated an attack that killed him and most of his inner circle. And now you expect to just walk away and rebuild like nothing happened? I expect to walk away because I'm the only thing standing between you and a war you can't win. Lucien's voice was calm, but his body language screamed tension. You take me out. Every organization in this city comes for you. The Koreans, the Mexicans, even the families who've been neutral for years. They'll tear you apart. Or they'll see an opportunity to expand their own territories and stay out of it entirely. You willing to bet your life on that? Are you? The silence stretched out like a wire pulled too tight. Selene could see one of the men on Lucien's side shifting his weight, his hand drifting toward his belt. She recognized him, one of the guards from the penthouse, someone she'd seen a dozen times bringing Lucien reports or taking orders. Marcus saw it too. He tensed beside her and whispered, That's Jordan. He's been on Lucien's payroll for 3 years. He's about to draw. I know. Everything happened at once. Jordan pulled his gun and shot the man next to him in the back of the head. Blood sprayed across the concrete, and the body dropped like someone had cut its strings. Lucien spun and put 2 bullets in Jordan's chest before the traitor could get off another shot. Then everyone was shooting, and the warehouse turned into chaos. Selene hit the ground as Marcus returned fire, his shots controlled and precise. She crawled behind a support pillar and pressed her back against it, her own gun clutched in both hands. Her medical training told her to run, to get out of the line of fire. But Lucien was somewhere in that mess, and she wasn't leaving without him. The gunfire was deafening. She could hear men screaming, could smell gunpowder and blood. Someone ran past her hiding spot, and she almost shot him before realizing it was one of Lucien's men, bleeding from a shoulder wound but still moving. "Where's Lucien?" she shouted. The man didn't answer, just kept running toward the exit. Selene peered around the pillar and saw Lucien behind another support column about 30 feet away, trading shots with 2 of Alexei's men. His face was bleeding from where something had grazed his temple, but his hands were steady. Marcus grabbed her shoulder. "We need to move. Get to Lucien and get out before reinforcements arrive." "What reinforcements?" Alexei wouldn't have done this without backup nearby. We've got maybe 2 minutes before this place is swarming with Volkov's soldiers. They moved from cover to cover, Marcus shooting anyone who got too close. Selene kept her gun up but didn't fire. She'd never shot anyone before, and despite everything that had happened, she wasn't sure she could start now. They were halfway to Lucien when Alexei stepped out from behind a pillar directly in front of them. He had a gun pointed at Marcus's chest and a smile on his face that made Selene's skin crawl. "Drop it," he said. Marcus hesitated. Alexei shot him in the knee, and the older man went down screaming. His gun skittered across the floor, and Alexei kicked it away. "You must be Selene," he said, turning the gun toward her. "I've heard so much about you. The woman who made Lucien Draven soft, the one who's going to watch him die." Selene raised her own gun, but her hands were shaking too badly to aim properly. "Stay back."
Or what? You'll shoot me? You don't even know how to hold that thing correctly. He was right. Selene could feel the gun wavering in her grip, heavy and foreign. She'd never been good with violence, had spent her entire adult life avoiding it, but she'd also spent the last week being shot at, kidnapped, and terrorized by men who thought they could use her as leverage. And she was tired. Tired of being scared. Tired of being a victim. Tired of watching the people she loved bleed because of her. Selene pulled the trigger. The gun kicked so hard it nearly flew out of her hands. The shot went wide, missing Alexei by at least a foot. But it was close enough that he flinched, and that gave Marcus time to pull a backup weapon from his ankle holster and put 3 rounds into Alexei's center mass. The Russian went down hard, blood spreading across his shirt in a bloom that looked black under the warehouse lights. He tried to raise his gun one more time, and Marcus shot him in the head. "Nice distraction," Marcus said through gritted teeth, clutching his shattered knee. "I was trying to hit him." "Well, you didn't, but it worked anyway." The gunfire had stopped. Selene looked around and saw bodies everywhere, at least a dozen men who weren't getting up. Lucien emerged from behind his pillar, his shirt torn and bloody but moving under his own power. He saw Selene and his expression went from relief to fury in the space of a heartbeat. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded. "Saving your life, apparently. You're supposed to be in the hospital with Hope. And you're supposed to be at a meeting, not walking into an ambush." They stared at each other across the warehouse floor. Then Lucien crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms so hard her ribs protested. "You're bleeding. I tore my stitches. You're insane. I learned from the best." He kissed her, hard and desperate, tasting like blood and smoke. When he pulled back, his hands were shaking. "We need to get out of here. Marcus is right about reinforcements. Alexei wouldn't have made this move alone." They helped Marcus to his feet and half-carried him toward the exit. Outside, the night air felt cool against Selene's overheated skin. More vehicles were pulling into the parking lot, SUVs with tinted windows that screamed organized crime. "That's not reinforcements," Marcus said. "That's the Koreans." 3 men got out of the lead vehicle, all wearing expensive suits and carrying themselves with the kind of confidence that came from knowing they were the biggest predators in the room. The one in front was in his 50s, silver hair and sharp eyes that cataloged everything. He looked at the warehouse, at the blood seeping under the door, at Lucien standing there looking like he'd been through a wood chipper. "We heard there was trouble." "Nothing I can't handle," Lucien said. Clearly, the Korean's gaze shifted to Selene. "This must be the woman we've heard so much about, the one who's caused all this chaos." "She didn't cause anything. The Volkovs did." "The Volkovs, who are now dead, both brothers, most of their organization scattered or absorbed by their competitors." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That creates an interesting power vacuum, doesn't it? If you're thinking about filling it, I'm thinking about our business arrangement, the one we came here to discuss before you decided to cancel the meeting." "I had priorities." "So I see. A daughter, I heard. Premature. In the NICU. The fact that the Koreans knew about Hope made Selene's blood run cold. Lucien's expression didn't change, but his hand drifted toward his gun. "If you're implying what I think you're implying, I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You have a family now, vulnerabilities, distractions." The Korean gestured at the warehouse. "This mess is proof of that. The old Lucien Draven would never have been caught off guard by such an obvious trap." The old Lucien Draven didn't have anything worth living for. And now you do. Which means you have something to lose. That makes you weak. Lucien pulled his gun and pointed it at the Korean's head. The man's bodyguards immediately drew their own weapons, but the Korean himself didn't even flinch. "You want to call me weak to my face?" Lucien said quietly. "Let's see how weak I am when I put a bullet between your eyes. You could do that, and my people would kill you and your woman and probably hunt down your daughter just to make a point. Or we could talk like civilized people." The standoff lasted for what felt like an hour, but was probably only seconds. Finally, Lucien lowered his gun. "Talk fast. I want the Volkov territories, all of them, and I want access to their distribution networks in exchange for maintaining our original agreement with you." "That's it?" "That's it. You keep your empire. I expand mine. Everyone wins."
except the families who've been fighting over those territories for the past week. They'll fall in line once they see I have your backing, or they'll die. Either way, it's not your problem." Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Selene could see him doing the math, weighing the options. Finally, he said, "I want assurances." "What kind?" "That my family is off limits. Permanently. You touch my daughter, my woman, anyone I care about, and the deal's over. I'll burn every bridge I have and use whatever's left of my organization to destroy yours." The Korean considered this. Then he nodded. "Acceptable. Your family is off limits. You have my word. Your word and a contract. In writing, tonight." "You don't trust me?" "I don't trust anyone." The Korean smiled, and this time it looked almost genuine. "Smart. We'll have the papers drawn up within the hour. In the meantime, you should get your woman back to the hospital. She looks like she's about to pass out." Selene realized he was right. Her vision was tunneling, and her legs felt like they were made of water. Lucien caught her before she fell and scooped her up in his arms. "Marcus, can you walk?" he asked. "Can I hop? Maybe. Walk is ambitious." "Get in the car. We're leaving." They piled into the SUV with Marcus in the back seat trying to tourniquet his knee and Lucien driving one-handed while keeping his other hand on Celine's shoulder. She leaned her head against the window and watched the city blur past, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and shock. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. "For now." "What about the men who betrayed you?" "Dead. All of them. The ones who weren't killed in the firefight I'll hunt down and deal with personally." "And the Korean? Can we trust him?" "Absolutely not. But we can work with him. At least until we're in a better position." Selene closed her eyes. "I want to go home." "We don't have a home anymore. The penthouse isn't safe. The safe house was compromised. Everything I own is a target." "Then where are we going?" Lucien was quiet for so long Selene thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "Somewhere nobody knows about. Somewhere I've kept as insurance for the past 5 years. Somewhere we can disappear until hope is strong enough to travel." "Travel where?" "Somewhere far from Chicago, far from all of this." He glanced at her, and the expression on his face was so raw it hurt to see. "I'm done, Selene, with the empire, with the politics, with pretending I can be both the man you need and the monster this city requires. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing hope. And I'm walking away from everything else." "Lucien, I mean it. The Korean can have the Volkov territories. Marcus can run what's left of my organization until he finds someone else to take over. I'm out. They won't let you just walk away. They will if the alternative is me burning everything down on my way out." Selene wanted to argue, but she didn't have the energy. She let herself drift, half asleep and half conscious, while Lucien drove through the city like he was trying to outrun demons. At some point they stopped, and Marcus got out, limping toward a car that was waiting for him. Then they were moving again, heading west toward the suburbs and beyond. The safe house, the real one, the one Lucien had never told anyone about, was 2 hours outside Chicago in a town so small it didn't even have a stoplight. A farmhouse on 20 acres of land, surrounded by fields that stretched to the horizon in every direction. It looked like something out of a postcard, white paint and a wraparound porch, and a barn that had seen better days but was still standing. Lucien carried Selene inside and laid her on a couch that smelled like dust and old leather. He disappeared into another room and came back with a first aid kit, kneeling beside her and carefully cutting away her blood-soaked shirt. "This is going to hurt," he said. "Everything hurts." He cleaned the wound as gently as he could, but Selene still had to bite down on her fist to keep from screaming. The stitches had torn completely, and the gunshot wound was bleeding freely again. Lucien worked in silence, his hands steady despite the exhaustion written across his face. When he was done, he taped gauze over it and helped her into a clean shirt he'd found somewhere. "You need a real doctor," he said. "Later. Right now I just need to sleep." "Selene, please, Lucien, I can't do anything else tonight. I just need to close my eyes for a few hours and know that nobody's trying to kill us." He helped her to a bedroom upstairs and tucked her into a bed that felt like heaven, despite the ancient mattress. She was asleep before he even turned off the light. When she woke up, the room was full of gray morning light, and Lucien was sitting in a chair by the window, staring out at the fields. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. "What time is it?" Selene asked.
Just past 6. How long was I out? 8 hours. She pushed herself upright despite her body's protests. We need to get back to the hospital. Hope. I've been calling every hour. She's stable, doing well, actually. The nurses said she's breathing better, and her blood sugar is normalizing. I need to see her. I know, we'll go this afternoon, but first we need to talk. Something in his tone made Selene's stomach clench. About what? Lucien turned away from the window, and the expression on his face was the same one he'd worn when he'd told her he was walking away from his empire. Determined, scared, certain and uncertain at the same time. I meant what I said last night. I'm done with Chicago, done with the life. But I can't just disappear without tying up loose ends, or people will come looking for us. For hope. What kind of loose ends? The kind that involve making sure everyone who knows about you and Hope believes we're already dead. Selene stared at him. You want to fake our deaths? It's the only way to make sure we're truly free. We stage something convincing. A car accident, maybe. Or a fire. Something that leaves bodies too burned to identify, but identifiable enough through DNA that people believe it's real. That's insane. That's survival. As long as people think I'm alive, they'll keep coming after us, keep trying to use you and Hope as leverage. But if they think we're dead, if they think the whole Draven line ended in a tragic accident, they'll move on, find new enemies, new targets. And what about your people? Marcus? The ones who've been loyal to you? Marcus knows. I called him this morning. He's already working on it, planting evidence, building a narrative. By the end of the week, Lucien Draven and his family will be dead and buried. Selene felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. And then what? Then we become someone else. New names, new identities. We take Hope somewhere quiet and raise her like normal parents raise their kids. Soccer games and parent-teacher conferences and worrying about things like homework instead of hit squads. You really think it's that easy? No, but I think it's possible, and that's more than I've had in a long time. Selene looked at him and saw the man she'd fallen in love with 3 years ago in that hotel bar. Not the kingpin, not the monster. Just Lucien, tired and scared and desperate for a chance at something better. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay. We'll do it. We'll disappear. Build new lives. Give Hope a chance at normalcy. She held out her hand and he took it, his grip warm and solid. But you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that when we walk away, we actually walk away. No looking back. No keeping one foot in that world just in case. We burn it all down and start over completely. Lucien lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. I promise. They spent the next 2 days at the farmhouse while Marcus orchestrated the most elaborate funeral Chicago had seen in years. A car accident on the freeway, 3 vehicles involved, fire so intense it melted the steel. Bodies in the wreckage that matched Lucien and Selene's general descriptions. DNA that had been carefully planted. It was all over the news within 12 hours. By the end of the week, everyone who mattered believed it was real. Selene watched it unfold from the hospital, sitting beside Hope's incubator and trying to process the fact that she was legally dead. It felt surreal, like she was watching her own life from outside her body. Hope was getting stronger every day, breathing on her own more often than not, gaining weight slowly but steadily. The doctor said she'd probably be able to leave the NICU within another week if she kept improving. On the 5th day, Marcus came to visit. He walked with a cane now, his shattered knee held together with pins and prayers. He sat down beside Selene and looked at Hope with an expression she couldn't quite read. She's beautiful, he said finally. Thank you. Looks like Lucien. Poor kid. Selene found herself smiling despite everything. She has his eyes. And hopefully your disposition. One Lucien Draven in the world was enough. They sat in silence for a while. Then Marcus said, the Korean took over the Volkov territories like we thought he would, consolidated power faster than anyone expected. The families that were fighting over the scraps fell in line or disappeared. And Lucien's organization? Being absorbed piece by piece. Some went to the Koreans, some to the Mexicans. A few smaller operations went independent. He paused. Nobody's looking for you. As far as they're concerned, the Draven line ended in that car fire. Good. Is it? Marcus looked at her seriously. You're giving up everything. Your name, your history, Any chance of coming back to this life. I know. And you're okay with that? Selene looked down at her daughter, sleeping peacefully in her plastic box, unaware of the chaos her existence had caused. I've never been more okay with anything in my life. Marcus nodded slowly, then he pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. From Lucien. New identities, birth certificates, social security numbers, everything you need to disappear completely. Selene opened the envelope and found 3 sets of documents. Driver's licenses for Lucien and herself with different names and addresses in Montana. A birth certificate for Hope with the same last name, listing them as her parents. Sarah and James Mitchell, she read aloud, and Hope Mitchell. Boring names, forgettable. Perfect for people who don't want to be found. How did you get these so fast? I've been in this business a long time. I know people who know people. Marcus stood up with a wince. I should go. Staying too long might draw attention. Marcus. Selene caught his arm. Thank you for everything, for believing in him even when he was making decisions that didn't make sense. He's my friend. Has been for 15 years. If walking away from everything makes him happy, then I'll help him do it. He smiled, sad and tired. Take care of each other, and take care of that little girl. She's the best thing either of you ever did. He left before Selene could respond. She sat there holding the envelope and staring at the name on her new driver's license. Sarah Mitchell. A woman with no past and no future except the one she built for herself. She could live with that. 3 days later, Hope was released from the NICU. The doctors gave Selene a list of instructions and warnings and follow-up appointments they'd never keep. Lucien arrived in a different car with different license plates, and they walked out of the hospital like any normal couple taking their new baby home. Except they weren't normal. And they weren't going home. They were driving toward a new life with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the hope that maybe, finally, they could be free. They made it 50 miles before Selene's phone rang. She didn't recognize the number but answered it anyway, some instinct telling her it was important. Sarah Mitchell. A woman's voice. Professional. Cold. Or should I say Selene Vale? Selene's heart stopped. Who is this? Someone who knows you're not really dead. Someone who's been watching you and Lucien set up your little disappearing act. And someone who has a very interesting proposition for you. I don't know what you're talking about. Save it. I know everything. The fake IDs, the car accident, the plan to run to Montana and raise your daughter in obscurity. And I'm willing to let you do it, for a price. Lucien looked over at her, alarm in his eyes. Selene put the phone on speaker. What kind of price? She asked. Information. Specifically everything you know about Lucien's remaining contacts. Names, numbers, distribution routes. Offshore accounts he didn't liquidate. All of it. I don't have that information. Don't lie to me. You lived with him for 18 months. You were there when he made calls and took meetings. You know more than you think you do. And if I refuse? The woman on the phone laughed. Then I make a few calls of my own. Let people know that the Draven family isn't as dead as everyone thinks. I'm sure there are at least a dozen organizations that would be very interested in that information. Selene looked at Lucien. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. In the back seat, Hope made a soft sound in her sleep. How do I know you'll keep your word? Selene asked. You don't. But what choice do you have? Lucien reached over and hung up the phone. Then he pulled off the highway onto a side road and drove until they were surrounded by nothing but farmland. He put the car in park and sat there, his hands still on the wheel, his jaw tight. We can't give her anything, he said finally. The moment we do, she owns us. Forever. And if we don't, she tells everyone we're alive. Then we run, change the plan. Different state, different names, stay off the grid completely. For how long? The rest of our lives? Always looking over our shoulders? If that's what it takes. Hope started crying in the back seat, a thin wail that sounded too loud in the quiet car. Selene unbuckled and climbed into the back to pick her up, holding her daughter against her chest and rocking her gently. There has to be another way, she said. There isn't. We either give this woman what she wants and become her information source forever, or we run and hope she never finds us. Or we find out who she is and deal with her before she can make good on her threat. Lucien turned around to look at her. That means going back to Chicago, back into the world we just escaped. I know. It means violence, probably death.
Definitely risk. I know that too. Selene,
I'm so tired of running. The words came out sharper than she intended. I ran from you. I ran from Dmitri. I've been running from this life since the day I met you.
and I'm done. I'm done letting people use our daughter as a weapon against us. I'm done being afraid. So either we go back and end this permanently, or we spend the rest of our lives waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Lucian stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression Selene had ever seen on his face.
All right then, he said, let's go to war one more time, and when it's over, we burn this whole rotten city down behind us and never look back. He put the car in gear and turned around, heading back toward Chicago and whatever waited for them there. In the back seat, Hope had stopped crying. She stared up at her mother with wide blue eyes that looked too knowing for a week-old baby. Selene kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, I'm sorry, baby girl, but this ends now. One way or another, this ends now. And as the city rose up on the horizon like a dark promise, she meant every word. The phone rang again before they reached the city limits. Same unknown number. Selene answered it and put it on speaker without saying a word. I see you turned around, the woman said. Smart choice. We're not giving you anything, Lucien said, his eyes on the road. But we are going to find out who you are. And then we're going to have a conversation about what happens to people who threaten my family. Brave words from a dead man. But if you want to meet face to face, I'm willing to accommodate. There's a diner on West Madison called Rosie's. Be there in 2 hours. Come alone or the deal's off. We have a baby. Then figure it out. 2 hours, Lucien. Don't be late. She hung up. Lucien slammed his hand against the steering wheel hard enough to make the whole car shake. In the back seat, Hope started crying again, and Selene reached back to stroke her daughter's tiny hand. We can't bring her to a meet, Selene said. I know. And we can't leave her with strangers. I know that too. Lucien pulled out his phone and made a call. It rang 4 times before someone answered. Marcus, I need a favor. They met Marcus at a gas station on the outskirts of the city. He was waiting beside his car, leaning on his cane and looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. When he saw them pull up, his expression went from surprised to resigned.
I thought you were gone, he said. We were. Someone called us back. Lucien opened the back door and carefully unbuckled Hope from her car seat. The baby was awake now, staring up at the fluorescent lights with the kind of serious expression that made her look older than her 8 days. I need you to watch her, just for a few hours. Marcus looked at the baby like she was a live grenade. I don't know anything about babies.
You don't need to. Just keep her safe, feed her if she's hungry, change her if she needs it. We'll be back before dark. And if you're not, then take her to the address in this envelope. Lucien handed over a sealed envelope with Marcus's name written on it in Selene's handwriting. Everything she needs is in there. Money, identity papers, a list of people who can help raise her if we don't make it. Marcus took the envelope but didn't open it. Who are you meeting? Someone who knows we're not dead. Someone who wants information we're not going to give. That's a good way to end up actually dead. Probably. Lucien carefully transferred Hope into Marcus's arms. The older man held her awkwardly, like she might break if he breathed wrong. But I'm tired of running, and I'm tired of letting other people control my life through fear. So we're going to end this, one way or another. Selene leaned in and kissed Hope's forehead, breathing in the sweet baby smell of her. Be good for Uncle Marcus, she whispered. Then to Marcus, if we're not back in 6 hours, open that envelope and do what it says. Selene, please, just promise me you'll take care of her if we can't. Marcus looked down at Hope, who had grabbed onto his thumb with her tiny fist. I promise, but you better come back for her. I'm too old for this parenting nonsense. They left Marcus standing in the gas station parking lot with a baby that wasn't his and drove toward the city in silence. Selene felt like she'd left half her heart back there with her daughter, but she also knew this was the only way. As long as someone out there knew they were alive and could use that knowledge against them, they'd never be safe. Rosie's Diner was exactly the kind of place where people went to disappear. Worn vinyl booths, fluorescent lights that flickered, coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner since morning. The lunch rush had passed and only a handful of people remained, scattered across tables and speaking in low voices that suggested they all had their own secrets. Lucien and Selene walked in together and scanned the room. In the back corner booth sat a woman in her 30s with dark hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that cataloged everything about them in the 3 seconds it took to cross the diner. She wore a business suit that was too expensive for this neighborhood and had a laptop open in front of her. They slid into the booth across from her. Up close, Selene could see she had a small scar above her left eyebrow and the kind of posture that suggested military training or something close to it. "Sarah and James Mitchell," the woman said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Or should I use your real names?" "You can call us whatever you want," Lucien said, "but you're going to tell us who you are and who you work for before this conversation goes any further." The woman smiled without warmth. "My name is Victoria Chen. I work for a consortium of investors who have a vested interest in maintaining stability in Chicago's underworld." A consortium. Lucien leaned back and crossed his arms. Which means what? The Koreans? The Mexicans? Someone we've never heard of? All of the above, plus a few legitimate businessmen who prefer to keep their connections to the criminal world quiet. Victoria closed her laptop and folded her hands on top of it. When you died, or appeared to die, it created a power vacuum that several organizations rushed to fill. The Koreans got the Volkov territories. The Mexicans expanded into your former holdings on the south side. Everyone assumed that was the end of the Draven Empire. It was. Except you're not dead, which means the Empire isn't quite as defunct as everyone thought. And that creates a problem. "What problem?" Selene asked. "The problem of uncertainty. Right now everyone's operating under the assumption that Lucien Draven is gone and his organization has been fully absorbed. But if word gets out that you're alive, it destabilizes everything. Old loyalties resurface. Territory disputes reignite. We're back to the kind of chaos that's bad for business. So you want us to stay dead? I want you to make it permanent. Burn the fake identities. Disappear for real this time. Never come back to Chicago or anywhere near the criminal networks you used to operate in." Victoria pulled a folder from her briefcase and slid it across the table. "In exchange, my employers are willing to provide significant financial support. Enough to set you up anywhere in the world and live comfortably for the rest of your lives." Lucien opened the folder. Inside were bank statements showing accounts in the Cayman Islands with balances that made Selene's eyes widen. Millions of dollars, more than they'd ever need. "This is a bribe," he said flatly. "This is a business transaction. We're buying your permanent absence from a market you no longer have any stake in." "And if we refuse?" Victoria's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Then I make a few phone calls, and everyone who's currently comfortable with the new power structure learns that the old king isn't quite as dead as they thought. Within 24 hours, you'll have a dozen different organizations hunting you. Within 48, you'll be dead for real, along with your daughter." The temperature in this diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. Lucien's hand moved toward his hip, where Selene knew he kept a gun. Victoria noticed the movement and smiled. "Go ahead, shoot me if you want, but I have insurance. Files set to automatically release if I don't check in every 12 hours. Kill me, and you've just guaranteed that everyone in Chicago knows you're alive by morning." "Who else knows?" Selene asked. "Right now, just me and my employers, and we're perfectly happy to keep it that way as long as you cooperate." "How did you find out?" "I've been watching Marcus. He's a good man, but not good at covering his tracks when he's emotional. The way he arranged your funeral was just a little too perfect. The DNA evidence, a little too convenient. I started digging and found the holes." Victoria gestured at the folder. "This is a generous offer. Take it. Disappear. Give your daughter a normal life far away from all of this." Lucien looked at Selene. She could see him doing the math, weighing the options. They could take the money and run. Start over somewhere tropical where nobody knew their names. Raise hope on a beach somewhere and never look back. Or they could refuse and spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, waiting for the day someone figured out they were still alive. "We need to discuss this," Selene said. "Privately." Victoria nodded. "You have 5 minutes. I'll be outside." She slid out of the booth and walked out of the diner, leaving them alone with the folder and its impossible promise. Lucien ran both hands through his hair. This is what we wanted. A way out. Money to start over. No more running. Except we'd be taking money from the same kind of people we were trying to escape. Does it matter where the money comes from if it buys us freedom? It matters if those people decide they want something else from us later.
if they use that money as leverage. The alternative is turning down their offer and going back to running. Or worse, staying and fighting a war we can't win against opponents we can't even identify. Selene looked out the window at Victoria, who was leaning against a car and checking her phone with the kind of casual confidence that came from knowing she held all the cards. Everything in Selene's gut told her this was wrong, that taking this woman's money would just be trading one prison for another. But looking at the numbers in that folder, thinking about what it could mean for Hope, she couldn't quite make herself say no. "What do you want to do?" she asked Lucien. He closed the folder and pushed it to the center of the table. "I want to tell her to go to hell. I want to walk out of here and disappear on our own terms without owing anyone anything." But I'm tired, Selene. I'm tired of fighting, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of wondering if today's the day someone puts a bullet in me and leaves you and Hope alone. He met her eyes, and the exhaustion there was so deep it made her chest ache. Maybe it's time to admit I can't win this fight. Maybe it's time to take the exit they're offering and just be grateful we get one at all. Selene reached across the table and took his hand. If we do this, we do it with our eyes open. We take their money, and we disappear completely. No contact with anyone from our old lives. No looking back. We become Sarah and James Mitchell for real, and we never tell Hope the truth about where we came from. Can you live with that? Can you? Lucien was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. Yes. If it means keeping you both safe, I can live with anything. They called Victoria back inside and Lucien told her they'd take the deal. She smiled like she'd known they would all along and produced a contract that was surprisingly straightforward for something orchestrated by a criminal consortium. They signed with their new names, Sarah Mitchell's signature shaky but legible beside James Mitchell's precise script. "The money will be transferred within 24 hours, Victoria said, tucking the contract into her briefcase. "I'd suggest you use it to get as far from Chicago as possible. Montana is nice this time of year, or maybe somewhere warmer, the Caribbean, South America." "We'll figure it out," Lucien said. "I'm sure you will." Victoria stood and extended her hand. Lucien looked at it for a long moment before shaking it. "Pleasure doing business with you, and congratulations on your daughter. I hope she grows up never knowing what her father used to be." She walked out of the diner and disappeared into a car that pulled up immediately, like she'd been expecting this exact outcome. Selene watched her go and felt something heavy settle in her chest. Relief, maybe, or the beginning of regret. She couldn't tell which. They picked up Hope from Marcus 2 hours later. The baby was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of the deal that had just been made to secure her future. Marcus handed her over with obvious relief and didn't ask any questions about how the meeting went. He just hugged them both, held on to Lucien a little longer than strictly necessary, and told them to be happy. "You're the best friend I've ever had," Lucien said quietly. "I wouldn't have survived this long without you." "You would have. You're too stubborn to die." Marcus stepped back and swiped at his eyes. "Go. Get out of here before I change my mind about letting you leave." They drove away from Chicago as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like the city was burning behind them. Selene held Hope in the back seat and watched the skyline shrink in the rear-view mirror until it was just a smudge on the horizon. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Montana, like Victoria suggested. There's a town called Whitefish near Glacier National Park. Small, quiet. The kind of place where nobody asks questions about where you came from." "You've been there before?" "Once, years ago. I liked it. Thought maybe someday I'd retire there." He glanced at her in the mirror. "Guess someday is now." They stopped at a motel outside the city and paid cash for a room with 2 beds and a view of a parking lot that had seen better decades. Selene fed Hope and changed her while Lucien made calls on a burner phone, arranging for the farmhouse to be sold and the proceeds funneled into their new accounts. By the time he was done, it was after midnight and Hope was asleep in a